Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Reggie Keenan, of course, along with Alan Duncan on the HRS committee. And Mr. Chair, we have one action item for this week. Then we'll also have a discussion item. And the first matter we're going to discuss is the consolidated data report, the annual report to the General Assembly. I think Ms. Jennifer is going to take us through that. And a lot of detailed information, but it's on your time now. Go ahead. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Vice Chair Keenan, and Superintendent Truitt. I am going to be giving the consolidated data report, and we can go to the next slide. And so we did something a little different in having two separate documents. One is the GA report, which is the statutory requirement, and then the other is what you have asked as the state board over the years. So we can go to the next one. And so, of course, this addresses goal number 1, and I think the objectives are incorrect. I think it's objective 1 and 4. We have 2, but I think it's 1 and 4. Go ahead. So the Center for Safer Schools duties statutorily is to conduct trainings and professional development, technical assistance, resources, collect and analyze and disseminate the data, and collaborate and coordinate with other agencies. And this consolidated data report will consist of those 6 subtopics. I'm going to try to go through as quickly as possible since it's so many, but please stop me at whatever time. The changes that were made and updates, we expanded definitions, calculations, and data consideration as was requested by the board. We utilized an additional disclosure avoidance technique to protect student privacy for those small groups. We've added a list of figures and tables. We restructured the general findings so that they can be similar to the other reports that are done. And then we created the companion report. And that is the report last year and years previous, it was one report. So what we did was we separated out what was statutorily required and that would be submitted to the GA, and then we came up with a companion document that addresses what you have previously asked us for. Okay. So, disciplinary incidents from July 2021 through 22 was 436,818 incidents. The total of the incidents for 2018 and 2019 were 443,419. And let me stop by saying what we ended up doing with this report is we ended up doing 22 in comparison to 18, 19, because that was pre-pandemic, and the numbers for the years in between were really not a true reflection because children left school early in 1920, and then there was variations in who was in school and virtual in 2021, okay? So when we kept the data is there for those years in between, but as I'm going to do the comparison, I'm going to do it pre-pandemic, okay? So I think slide 8. There was a total of 9,788 alternative learning placements from July through June of 21-22. There was a total of 12,364 alternative learning placements for compared July 2018 and 2019. Okay. There was a total of 11,663 dropouts from July 2021 through June 2022, and there was a total of 9,991 dropouts from July 2018 through June 2019. 11,170 acts of crime and violence were reported across the state in 2021-22, which is over 1,600 more than what was in 2018-19. The rate was 7.51 per 1,000 students, which is higher than the 2018-19, which had the rate of 6.29. When compared to the most recent pre-pandemic school year, 18-19, the total number of crimes increased by 16.9%, from the 9,554 to 11,170. The rate of crime per 1,000 students was 7.51 per 1,000 students, and an increase in 21-22 by 16.3%. Next slide. Consistent with previous years, possession of controlled substance was the most frequently reportable act of crime in 21-22. The second most reportable act reported was possession of weapon. Now that's excluding firearms and powerful explosives, followed by assault on school personnel as the third most reported. Two of the reportable crimes were not reported in 21-22, and that was rape and indecent liberties with a minor. In elementary schools, possession of a weapon was reported more frequently in 2021-22, followed by assault on school personnel, possession of a controlled substance, and then possession of alcohol. The most frequently reported crime in middle schools was possession of a controlled substance, followed by possession of a weapon, assault on school personnel, and possession of alcohol. In high school, the crime reported more frequently was possession of a controlled substance, followed by possession of a weapon, possession of an alcoholic beverage, and assault on school personnel. Next slide. Bless you. Reportable acts of crime increased 16.9% pre-pandemic and 14.6% in the last 5 years. Next slide. 5,991 acts of crime and violence were reported in high school grades in 21-22, which is compared to 18-19, which was 4,850. The rate was 13.6 per 1,000 students, which was higher than in 2018-19, which was 10.73. In middle school grades, there were 3,747 crimes committed by students, offenders, with a rate of 10.44 crimes per 1,000 middle school students. Across the elementary grades, there were 1,427 crimes in 21-22, with a rate of 2.12 crimes per 1,000 elementary students. Next slide. In 21-22, there were 217,928 short-term suspensions reported statewide. The short-term suspension rate in 21-22 was 146.57 short-term suspensions per 1,000 students enrolled. The total number of short-term suspension increased by 7.2% in 21-22 compared to the 203,298 reported in 2018-19. The 21-22 short-term suspension rate of 146.57 per 1,000 students increased by 11.9% from 130.95 per 1,000 students in 18 and 19. Next slide. Within the race ethnicity subgroup, Black students had the highest rate of short-term suspension in 21-22. 303.78 per 1,000 black students enrolled, followed by American Indian students, 242.84% per 1,000 students enrolled, and two or more race students, 178.96 per 1,000 students enrolled. Across all student subgroups in 21-22, black students, students with disability, and American Indian students had the highest rate of short-term suspension. Next slide. As seen in previous years, males received more short-term suspension than females in 21-22. The rate of short-term suspension for male students, 196.66 per 1,000 male students enrolled, was 2.17 times the rate for females, which was 90.96 per 1,000 female students enrolled in 21-22. Next slide. Compared to 18-19, short-term suspension rate increased for all race ethnicities except Asians. Next slide. In 21-22, middle school grades reported the most short-term suspension with 96,572 suspensions and had highest rate of short-term suspension per 1,000 students enrolled of 296.02 suspensions across all middle school grades. High school grades reported 76,065 short-term suspensions and had a rate of 167.04 per 1,000 students enrolled. Elementary grades reported 45,291 short-term suspensions and had a rate of 67.35 per 1,000 students in 21-22. Next slide. In 21-22, 693 long-term suspensions were reported, an increase of 18.1% from the 587 long-term suspension reported in most recent pre-pandemic year, 18-19, and a 3% increase from the 673 reported in 17-18 academic year. The rate of long-term suspension in 21-22 was 46.61 per 100,000 students. The 21-22 rate of long-term suspension increased by 23.3% compared to 18-19 and 6.3% compared to 17-18. The 693 long-term suspensions reported in 21-22 were assigned to 685 individual students. Next slide. Male students received more long-term suspension than females in 21-22. The rate of long-term suspension for male students, 64.60 per 100,000 male students enrolled, was 2.41 times the rate for females, 26.69 per 100,000 female students enrolled in 21-22. Within the race ethnicity subgroup, Pacific Islander students had the highest rate of long-term suspension of 138.38 per 100,000 Pacific Islander students enrolled, followed by black students with a rate of long-term suspension of 102.93 per 100,000 black students enrolled. Asian students and American Indian students had the lowest rate. Next slide. The rate of long-term suspension for male students was higher than in 2018 and 19, but lower than 2017-18. The rate of long-term suspension for female students was the highest in the last 5 years. Next slide. Compared to 2018-19, Long-term suspension rates increased for all race ethnicities except American Indian and 2 or more races. Next slide. High school grades reported the most long-term suspensions in 21-22 and accounted for 57.4% of all long-term suspensions. Across all high school grades, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, 398 long-term suspensions were reported statewide for a rate of 87.4 suspensions per 100,000 high school students. There was 259 long-term suspension in middle schools. The rate of long-term suspension in middle school was 72.15 per 100,000 students. Next slide. In 21-22, there were 48 expulsions. I'm on the right slide. I can't see it. Yes. Listen, when you get old. Okay, there was 48 expulsions across all North Carolina schools. In 21-22, 39 or 81.3% expelled students were male. Of the 48 students expelled in 21-22, 64.6% were black students, 18.8% were white students, 14.6% were Hispanic students, and 2.1% were 2 or more race students. Of the 48 students expelled in 21-22, 12.5% were students with disability. Additionally, 87.5% expulsion occurred in high school grades. 9th graders received the most expulsion during the academic year. Next slide. 21-22 is the 4th consecutive academic year in which 0 districts across the state have reported the use of corporal punishment in school. Next slide. In 21-22, North Carolina public schools assigned 216,530 in-school suspensions of a half day or more to 112,399 students with a rate of 145.63 in-school suspensions per 1,000 students. Compared to the most recent pre-pandemic school year, the total number of in-school suspensions decreased by 9.3% from 18-19 to 21-22. The rate of in-school suspension decreased by 5.3% from 18-19 to 21-22. Next slide. Of the 216,530 full-day in-school suspension, 149,160 or 68.9% were assigned to males, and 67,370 or 31.1% were assigned to females. Within the race ethnicity subgroup, black students had the highest rate of in-school suspension, 252.17 per 1,000 black students enrolled, followed by 2 or more race students at 182.28 per 1,000, and Asian students had the lowest. In 21-22, black students, students with disability, and male students had the highest rate of in-school suspension per 1,000 students among the various student groups. Next slide. Students in middle school grades received the most in-school suspension in 21-22 and had the highest rate of in-school suspension per 1,000 students of 284.20 suspensions. 9th grade students received the most in-school suspensions. Next slide. 21-22, schools reported 4,000 alternative learning placements as a disciplinary action. The rate of alternative learning placement was 2.69 placements per 1,000 students. Compared to the most recent pre-pandemic school year, the total number of placements decreased by 8.2% from 18-19 to 21-22. Next slide. In the 21-22 school year, 34.2% of the 4,000 assignments to alternative learning programs or schools for disciplinary reasons were assigned to female students and 65.8% to male students. Black students, American Indian students, and students with disability had the highest rate of placement per 1,000 students, 6.84, 5.08, and 4.28 respectively. Next slide. Students in high school grades received the most alternative learning placement for disciplinary reasons in 21-22, totaling 53.2% of all placements. However, middle school grades had the highest rate of placement per 1,000 students of 4.93 placements. Next slide. Alternative learning programs in schools reported 9,788 student enrollments, regardless of the reason for enrollment, during the 21-22 academic year. A 20.8% decrease from most recent pre-pandemic school year of 18-19, and a 23.2% decrease from 17-18. Next slide. In 21-22, the highest rate for ALPS enrollments per 1,000 students were for Black students, American Indian students, and students with disability, with the rates per 1,000 students of 11.94, 11.43, and 9.4, respectively. Next slide. 21-22 school year, 36.7% of the 9,788 ALPS enrollments were for female students and 63.3% for male. The rate of ALP enrollment for females was 4.89 per 1,000 female students and 8.05 per 1,000 students for male. Next slide. All 21-22 rates of ALPS enrollment by race ethnicity subgroup dropped from 18-19. Next slide. In 21-22, North Carolina Public School reported 11,711 dropouts in grades 1 through 12, including grades 13 and XG. This is a 17.2% increase from the 9,991 reported in the most recent pre-pandemic year of 18-19, and a 7.1% increase from the 10,939 reported in 17-18. Next slide. North Carolina recorded 10,841 dropouts in high school grades 9 through 13 for the 21-22 school year, and 14% increase from the 9,512 reported in 18-19, and a 3% increase from the 10,523 reported in 17-18. The North Carolina high school dropout rate for 21-22 academic year increased to 2.25 dropouts per every 100 high school students from a rate of 2.01 per every 100 high school students in 18-19. Next slide. While white students account for the largest number and percent of students who drop out in 21-22, given the size of the student population, the dropout rate for the white student is the second lowest dropout rate among the student subgroups at 1.69 dropout events per 100 white students. Students with disability had the highest dropout rate in 21-22, with a rate of 4.35 per 100 students with disability. American Indian students had the second. American Indian followed by Hispanic. Next slide. So last year when I came, it was my first year doing it, and we talked about what could be done. The center has spent its last year making recommendations based on bringing in partners who were licensed clinical social workers, retired educators, law enforcement, highway patrol, SBI, sheriffs, and whatever. And we have come up with these recommendations. They are just that, recommendations. This is what the center was designed for, is to provide training, technical assistance, and resources. And so our recommendation is to provide resources or support to any district or charter. And we are in the process of working with the Justice Academy to help develop curriculum that address cultural and racial differences. The Center for Safer School has its own training center that is under construction now. We are temporarily in Samarkand. I have a new training director, and his focus is to address the cultural and racial difference as it relates to the SROs. We are starting a parent initiative as a pilot to help parents better advocate for their children. We already have a student engagement coordinator, but we will be hiring a parent engagement coordinator within the next 60 to 90 days. These people address school safety concerns. I have created a multidisciplinary team, which is a group of individuals who I just previously named, who will be supporting me. They are from all over the state. They are from all disciplines: school psychologists, law enforcement, teachers, administrators, parents, school, and even local school board members. They will be helping with the development of a statewide discipline matrix as a model for utilization. It is, again, a suggestion, and it is a resource if it is warranted. We are already doing a threat assessment surveys. We're doing trainings. We have been doing them this quarter every Wednesday. As a matter of fact, there's one being held right now, and these are being done virtually. As of yesterday, because I don't know how many people were in there today, we have provided training for over 750 school personnel in a virtual model. We are using the Secret Service model. I have time and time again said that this is not a punitive action. We will be looking to support children who may in fact be a harm to themselves or others. So we definitely, there are restrictions around what I have asked Sigma, who is doing the actual training. I have asked them, and since we cut the check, that's important, that we don't have law enforcement in the interviewing room with the threat assessment. They are on the team, and they should be, because we want to move to SROs having more of a mentoring presence in the school. So they are on the threat assessment team. They are not in the interview. Let me say this is the best practice for DPI. I can't control who's in the interviewing room. And that is based on the fact that we don't want any conflict. We don't want it to be punitive. We don't want a child to say something and give an officer probable cause because he is in that interviewing room. I think I went ahead of my, all right, maybe I can look here, keep going. Right. So the lessons learned, we continue to refine, train, and provide evidence to the field of effectiveness of early warnings. We are working, part of the multidisciplinary team are people who in this building who is already doing this work. They are part of the MDT that I have created. This MDT will support me as I take recommendations to the center has a task force, and so I will be utilizing that MDT to take those recommendations to the task force. We are, the ensuring quarterly data review. We are doing that. We are looking at it. But there are some times that districts are, a little behind the actual putting in because of a variety of reasons, but we are looking at that. Next slide. So some of the things that we have done is we have new behavior codes have been added, new action codes have been added, and in 23-24, we intend to include other behavior and action codes. I do want to talk about the new action code, the conducted threat assessment. I was asked by the General Assembly to provide a threat assessment survey. I have not heard back on the recommendations for that, but in anticipation of that, we have added a code if schools, especially the ones who have taken the training, are doing threat assessments, that we do it in a consistent manner with fidelity. I think that's it. Is that it? Okay, well, there you go.
Any question, comments in reference to presentation at this point?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Fairley. I must confess, I think that in the amount of time that you've been in the position, you've done a wonderful job.
Thank you.
And I've been on the board or as an advisor for the better part of the last 7 years, and this probably is the first time I've seen this report be accompanied with robust recommendations and action steps, and so I think that you deserve credit and kudos for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
That being said, I have to confess that, as I'm doing like a body scan right now, I can feel my heart rate increasing, my blood pressure increasing, and I just get nauseous because when I first got introduced to this report, it was when I was an advisor as Teacher of the Year.
Okay.
And it was the first time that I saw so plainly what I knew to be true, what was happening in my classrooms, but to see it across the state. And I used to raise the issue then, and everybody kind of was like, yeah, we should do something about that. And year after year, nothing really gets done. You have to understand that assuming that all children who are children misbehave at a same or similar rate, right? Kids being kids, that when you see the sort of racial disparities that you see year after year after year after year, the research suggests it has started pretty much since desegregation in the 70s. And when all discipline goes down, that's good, but those gaps never dissipate. That it assumes that either something's wrong with the students, right? Because again, the assumption that all kids misbehave at the same rate is not something everybody believes. We have to be honest about that. Or we're assuming that there's something wrong with the system that's playing itself out in racial terms that are undeniable. And I can't get used to it. I will never get used to it. I'll never not be incensed by it. I'm always going to speak on it. Because there's a word for that. There's rooted in a history that, let's just be frank, we're trying to outlaw. Okay? And so what I want us to do is I want us to think not only about the groups that are disparately being suspended short-term, long-term, the rates of suspension, dropout, but that's a negative analysis. We know who's inadvertently or disproportionately being suspended. Let's think about it from a different perspective. Who's not being treated that way? The answer is crystal clear. I defy anybody to try to, offer a counter argument. The question going forward is, are we going to fulfill what's in our strategic plan? Because I think, generally speaking, we have not. When we talk about decreasing rates of exclusionary discipline among subgroups, and there's been some deliberation about the logic behind it, I think we can see very clearly why that's in our strategic plan. But are we going to really march headlong into changing this? Because this is an injustice. And so this is not a question or anything that you even have to respond to, because again, if you'd like to, sure, the microphone is open, but it's more of a declarative statement that I grow tired of seeing the same thing over and over and over again. I don't feel the sense of urgency, just in general, around the true robbery of educational rights that's taking place here. As we have conversations about student comfort, ironically. And so I just wanted to make that statement. Thank you for indulging.
Yeah, and so, Mr. Ford, now, if you don't know, you know I'm not going to let you make that statement. I mean, not say nothing. Okay. So the reality is, I get it. I told this board last time, my husband had 8 girls. We had 12 grandchildren, 1 on the way, and they all look like me. I get it, all right? I have been the director since February 2021. When I came here last year, I knew nothing about being the director. I had been in the center. The Center for Safer Schools is working tirelessly to ensure that we address that. But we went to the GA. The GA was generous. They have given us enough money for me to hire the additional staff that I need. We are addressing it as quickly as possible. Am I going to be able to eradicate it? I am not, okay? But I'm going to address it. But I also want to say, you're correct. There is some elements of racism, but there is also some elements that we need to help our parents do things a little different with their children, right? So I have 8, and believe it or not, all 8 weren't angels. Right? And so there were times that among those 8, they did not behave similar, right? And so I understand that. And I understand that there are some issues that are beyond the scope of DPI or the Center for Safer Schools. And I can't address those. But what I can promise you, like I promised you last year, and if the Lord delay is coming and I'm here next year, or something else happen, I will improve upon what we've already done, right? And each year, by the time I came last year, the year was almost over. So y'all can't charge that to me, right? Okay. This year, we are working tirelessly. Next year, you will see more improvement. We are getting out in the hedges and the highways. We are compelling teachers, law enforcement, whoever will listen, to come to the table to help us with this, because this is not something that the center can do. I mean, to be quite honest, the consolidated data report is the data. It's really not our job to solve it, right? But I'm going to take it, okay? I'm going to take it for the team, and I'm going to do what I can. And I promise you that whatever the board asks, we'll do the best that we can to do those things. I mean, we really will.
I just want to clarify, I have no doubts.
Okay.
And again, I want to applaud you.
Thank you.
For the brief time that you've been here. Thank you for clarifying that, right? Because your kudos are due. And you are one person, but you have a team.
Yeah.
But
small team.
A small team, right? Mm-hmm. And the problems are generational.
Yes.
And they are systemic.
Yes.
And so I want to recognize that and recognize that parents and parents in general, correct? I assume, right?
Yeah.
We
didn't isolate a parent.
Right.
Parents in general could be me.
Have a role to play, and I got 4 of myself, and they all different.
Right.
Just say different. You know what I mean? And so that role has to be done in concert with the system. I just appreciate your attention to the matter and your candor.
Yes.
Thank you.
A couple more comments and we move on, John.
Thank you. Question as a new board member. I look at all these numbers and probably can stand some education by you and my colleague, Dr. Ford. But I think of all of the students in North Carolina as being students of folks from North Carolina. Why do we have to put labels on them? You're black, you're white, you're Asian. So if that is beneficial, I'm fine with that. But if it serves a purpose that is not beneficial, to the students in North Carolina, it's very concerning to me. So I would just tell you that.
Okay.
As a white person.
Yeah, and so, yes, sir. And so it is beneficial. It's beneficial for a variety of reasons. One of the things that I indicated is that we will be seeking someone to work with the SROs and then later on other school personnel as it relates to cultural diversity and racial differences. And so the reality is there are differences. There are cultural differences, and we need to address those. So in order for me to identify what those cultures are, then I have to go through and mark who is who. It's not just black and white. I know we say that, but it's the Hispanic, it's the Native American, it is all of those. And so each culture, they should be recognized.
Dr. Dunn being Vice Chair. Superintendent.
Yes, thank you. So I kind of feel like I appreciate that you have given suggestions, and I've looked at the links that you've provided, the resources that are here, and there's some common threads in those information in those links that I think is really important for us to consider. But the conversation that we're not having is why. Why do we think this is? And I think to your point, the general statute that requires us to do this doesn't ask us to answer the why this is happening. And the data is not clear. I mean, the Hispanic population is on par with the white population for some of these points. And I don't know why that is. And to Mr. Blackburn's point, I mean, I'm as equally concerned about the students with disabilities, and this is what drives parents to leave their public schools. Parents of special needs children, when they feel like their needs are not being met, even though that school legally must meet those needs, when they feel like their needs are not being met, they go to a non-traditional school because they feel like their child's going to get more one-on-one attention that perhaps a big neighborhood school can't give them. But I think this is a really, really complicated issue. Mm-hmm. And to say that this is an issue that can be solved by calling out certain types of people, right? I don't think we're doing our students any good. And there are lots of reasons why this data looks the way they do. And they are historical, there's no doubt. But I think that if we really want to make a difference, we're going to have more conversations about why. Mm-hmm. Not just how to fix it, or how we think we should fix it.
It is a complicated, thank you, Mr. Keenan, and thank you so much for this. This is just chock full of data, and we could spend a long time doing the whys and the whys and root cause analyses and so on and so forth to get to the bottom, or try and we'll never get to the bottom, but work our way toward the bottom. I think part of the solution picture, if you will, believe it or not, we probably need more data. And the kind of data I would be interested in knowing, and it would be a more roll up your sleeves, let's get down to the bottom of this kind of study. I would like to know more about the school itself. If we could take where we have high percentages of students doing whatever, misbehaving, okay, tell me about the size of the school, the enrollment. Tell me about the demographics of the school. Tell me about the demographics of the faculty. Tell me about the opportunities to join clubs, play sports. And it's going deeper than, this is just the beginning. We need to know more. And I remember, I don't have the details, and one of the rules of research is never quote research, talk about research unless you have citation. So, but I'm going to break the law on that. I know the research is abundant the last 20 years on the fact that our schools overall are not leaning toward boys. They lean in a different direction. They lean toward girls. And I would say, what causes that? Who knows? It could be that in elementary grades we have more female teachers. I don't know. But anyway, there's something in the climate, in the culture of the school, I think is working well for kids. So it's going to take more of a study. This is just the beginning. This is scratching the surface. And I do believe, as a minority educator, I do believe that we need to not get hung up on labels forever and ever and ever, but we do need to talk about groups and the differences within groups to some extent, because if we don't, we will not be able to problem solve appropriately. And then we do that, and then we move on and talk about the greater good of all students. Mm-hmm. But I know this would be another research, more compilation of data for you, but I would want to know more about that place that we call school, where all these American Indians, African Americans, and other groups that are just, they're fed up with school.
Yeah. And I just want to say, to your point, I have already engaged a licensed clinical social worker at North Carolina State, and she is going to get me some interns to start looking at that. That will be over the summer, and then we'll start. I won't have the results next time this happens, but she is going to secure me some researchers to help us with
We've got to know more about that place we call school, where these children are going 180 days.
Pretty quick, we'll have Mr. Duncan.
I'm sorry,
And-
I got carried away.
It was you, and then
Further to Dr. Ford's point, one of the things he said was, there are some people, if we're honest, who don't believe that all children misbehave equally. And that is a fact, that there are different viewpoints in some quarters about that. One of the pieces of information that's not in this, and it's sort of lacking by our not having a uniform code of conduct in this state, but for those counties who have a code of conduct and have broken down the data, even if you believe that students may misbehave differently, if you break out the penalties for the exact same offense, there's a significantly greater penalty afforded to children of color as compared to children who are white. And there are endless and boundless studies that show that. And so it would be great if we can get to a place where we can get statewide data on that. We're not there right now. I know the superintendent's inquired about this, but we need to take a look at what we can do to perhaps get a more uniform code of conduct so we can evaluate this, because it will present the picture more clearly from a data standpoint. Just in context, and this is a larger commentary, this is not unique to schools. There are studies in law practice that show the exact same thing. There are studies in employment that show the exact same thing, and the disparities are significant in all of those areas. So we need to have precise data. We need to be able to measure how we may be changing the atmosphere and how we may be improving the culture and the environment. But the why question, whether it's required by the legislature or not, and meaningful open conversations in a way to get to this issue are very important in terms of how we change this dynamic, because we don't want to keep looking at numbers like this year after year that look, frankly, somewhat consistent year after year, despite the fact that there's a large acknowledgement at this point that there is an issue, there's a real issue. So how do we, rather than simply acknowledge a real issue, how do we change that issue? And that doesn't happen without a different kind of way of looking at all this.
I want to ask, surely we have some schools in North Carolina who have diverse populations, who are doing something positive to solve this problem. Are you aware of those schools, and are you able to learn from that and disseminate that information somehow to the larger school community? I mean, we know that some things work. I
Yeah.
know you've got a lot of things that you want to do, but
Yeah, no, and so the,
standout schools.
yes, and so the multidisciplinary team, that is part of their function. It is growing consistently, and it's going to break out, and that is an area that we have identified some schools that look like they're doing a great job in certain areas. And so what I will have is educators and administrators looking at that and then seeing what that is and then translating it to the non-educator, me.
Thank you. I'll just make this quick. When you're as old as I am, you get asked questions about things you're most proud of, and I was visiting with the folks back there from Randolph County earlier, and 12 years ago, there's a teacher, Gidget Kidd from Randolph County, who brought this issue to my attention about these are girl-centered schools. And it also came to light when one of my neighbors, who had an IQ probably 150, got redshirted in the 9th grade. Never made a B in her life. And 12 years ago, we changed the kindergarten cutoff date in North Carolina. And I'm saying that because I'm very proud of it. Everybody was against it. Howard Lee was against it. This board was against it. Frank Porter Graham was against it. Initially, Governor Easley was against it. But when I was able to show this didn't have anything to do with tourism, because that's what people think when they think about cutoff. I mean, they just think that. But it had everything to do with a 4-year-old boy who barely knew how to pee into a Cheerio. That's how you potty train 4-year-old boys sometimes, right? Okay. This is treasure humor. You just gotta get used to it. And a 6-year-old girl who knew her letters and her colors and her numbers. So you got a 4-year-old boy in the same classroom with a 6-year-old girl who is a year and a half ahead of the boy, and we never catch up. And who loses? Who lost for 41 years in this state? Who lost? Every damn body. The 4-year-old boy lost, the 6-year-old girl lost, and the teacher lost. And I'm saying that with so much passion because of the letters and cards I got from people who were 40 and 50 years old, who went to school before they were should have, and they've never overcome that. And I'm reminded, and I'll close, thank you. When we ran this legislation, I was the author of it, it was 8 words long. So when we talk about legislative agendas, this piece of legislation was 8 words. It struck 4 words in 2 words in 4 places. Changed one date, put in another date. That's it. The New York Times Magazine came in to Ayden, North Carolina, and did a 5-page expose on this 8-word bill. 5 pages. These are big pages with little print. And she was recounting because they let her sit through a kindergarten assessment. And one of the kindergarten assessment questions you get is, Dale, would you please draw a stick person? This really happened. So the boy put a line down, a paper like this. And the teacher said, what about the legs? So the boy does this. And then the assessor says, what about the arms? And the boy said, and the boy does this. And then the assessor says, what about the head? With that boy put his head down on the table and didn't answer any more questions. That was what was happening in this state for 40 years when we were putting 4-year-old boys in the classroom with 6-year-old girls. And so we moved the kindergarten cutoff date back. My point of saying that to you is as we look for these robust answers, some of them are so simple that you got to get to the bottom of them to get to the right results. That's my story.
Thank you.
And thanks to the teachers of the state coming behind me against Howard Lee, against this board, against Frank Porter Graham, against the governor, finally the governor easily realized, oh, this is a serious issue. we were able to get it passed, so now the kindergarten cutoff date is August 31st. And lastly, I'll just say this. It's not just kindergarten. We were putting our children at a competitive disadvantage on the SAT score for 40 years because there is a numerical relationship between 6 months of your chronological age and how you do on the SAT score. So we were putting our kids at a competitive disadvantage even on the SAT scores for 40 years. So that's my little admonition to say we may look for all these robust answers, but some of them may not be easy, but they might just be simple.
We gotta go, Ms. Hollinger, so
I know we gotta go, and I'm going with you. But I am so, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, but I am so pleased to sit and hear this discussion today around this table about this issue, which needs to be more often than we do. Jill, you're absolutely correct. There are schools in this state. One of them is in Guilford. I read about that school in Guilford all the time, there's no short-term suspension. This principal uses other things before that short-term suspension process. I don't know the name of the program, but it's in Guilford County. But one thing I need to say quickly, cultural actions depends upon who is reading that nonverbal action. It will depend upon whether that child receives short, long, or whatever. Example, you talk about females, bending of the eyes, popping of the lips, rolling of the shoulders, putting their hands on the hips. In some households, that's normal. But in the school environment, that can be taken as disrespectful to me. That cultural side of it, I don't think is being developed enough. But anyway, I will shut up, and I know we're long, but I've enjoyed hearing the conversation. I ditto everything my colleagues said, and Mr. Blackburn and others around this table. It is something that we need to address. And it might not be acceptable to all, but there are some things we just have to, it's a part of life. Thank you.
I just had a quick question. I know that, you left me, I'm sorry. I know you mentioned that you were having conversations with educators and leaders in school districts. I guess for me, my only question as we are looking for these best practices, right, of how are their schools actually doing it and changing things around and changing that dynamic, are kids going to be involved in that conversation as well? Because I guarantee you can walk into my 4th grade class and they will literally tell you what makes them happy in this space, what is going to make them feel good and respected as an individual in this space. So I just wanted to know, are kids a part of the conversation to tell you what they need and how they choose to be respected in a space and how they show respect? I mean, I think there's really a lot of power in us asking kids what they like and how they like to be treated and things like that.
Yes, so we have one student engagement coordinator and we are hiring another one. Their whole job is to engage students across the state in various vehicles. We have a couple of program initiatives to allow them to do that. They are looking at the consolidated data report, and we are addressing the districts that have the higher discipline challenges, and those are the ones that we're addressing. So yes, they are forming a, for lack of a better term, student advisory group among the student engagement coordinators, and so we are looking to launch that for this upcoming school year. Yes.
And I think it would be even further, like as we talk with districts, to even get their insights, the ones that have a code of conduct, as someone mentioned, like how intense was their student engagement within their code of conduct as well, and are those code of conduct clearly defined? Like we've had this discussion last year, I remember, around disrespect or insubordinate. Like do kids clearly understand, and does that school district itself or even the school understand what that means, what that looks like in that particular space? Because every school is not exactly cookie cutter the same, but we can have a community amongst ourselves of what we deem respect is, or for whatever. that may be.
Yep, we are. We are definitely including everybody, parent engagement, student engagement, and, of course, school personnel.
Ms. Amy White.
So, last comment.
Okay.
One thing that is critically missing in this discussion is the overlay of academic performance with the students that find themselves making poor choices in the classroom. What I would suggest to you is that high-performing students that do well, are less likely to misbehave in the classroom because they are engaged. And so when we talk about what we're doing with letters training and the build of getting kids on grade level before they ever leave 5th grade, because if we broke down this data again, the interventions that occur in the elementary level are manageable. What happens to students in the middle and high school grades exponentially increase because you have students who, because they are not focused and they are not engaged in the classroom, they find other things to do. And those other things to do often land them in front of an administrator. So our goal really should be to make sure that all of our students are performing well. Because I can guarantee you, if they're performing well, the poor performance and the poor behavior will increase relational to the amount that they're behaving well in the classroom. And that starts also with parents and getting them to understand that that student performance is directly relational to. After School Alliance says that students on grade level by the end of 5th grade have a 5-time greater chance of completing high school than those students who are below grade level in reading and math at the end of 5th grade.
Okay.
If you put those two together, you will absolutely see a strong and direct correlation.
I thank all of you for the great comments, making this fairly, and we're gonna do quickly our second item. Ms. Cynthia Small will come up and give us a quick rendition about our amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your indulgence.
Good afternoon. I'm Suzanne Schmall. I'm part of the Healthy Schools team, and we brought before you in January an update on Whole Child NC, the activities of that work group. Today we're going to bring before you an update on the policy, and that, as a reminder, that group was established as an interagency committee in 2015. It was rebooted in 2022. We've met 3 times, have new membership, and we'll share a little bit about what some of those policy revisions are here today. There's some of the members from our November 2022 meeting. And then before we review some of those policy revisions, I just want to make sure to thank Allison Schaefer and Ryan Collins, who really provided some great counsel to us in terms of consistent language and making sure that we didn't have any of vagueness within the policy and that we were consistent with other advisory committees as well. I also want to thank Maria Petrie Martin and Lou Martin for their support behind the scenes with the processes and especially with e-boards, which can sometimes be a challenge. So then you see here from May 2022 versus now March 2023, some of those revisions include the function and the responsibilities. There's not a whole lot of changes here, but in terms of focus and making sure that emphasizes grades K through 12, as well as using that whole school, whole community, whole child framework within there from the CDC. And then the next is around membership. That's where the majority of the changes were made, and we really modified that to include some removals of like the Department of Social Services, the Department of Mental Health, and then removing some of those State Board of Education members that were on here, and we reorganized it quite a bit. And those folks were removed because of recommendations that it was redundant, and then there was a liaison to the committee instead of members who were represented on that board, since recommendations will be brought before the board. Then on the next slide, you see where things were reorganized. For the Department of Health and Human Services, there are 3 categories there, and so we just kind of consumed everything together, added a senior policy advisor, so there's 3 roles there, and then added in the North Carolina PTA, NC Child, and again, that senior policy advisor within DHHS. And those recommendations came as part of the committee who made those recommendations. So the original policy indicated those roles, and then the committee made recommendations of who was missing from that conversation and who needed to be added. On the next slide, you'll see additional members, which included, we added the charter school, and then you'll see again that the State Board of Education liaison role. And there are terms for those members. So those members are not serving based necessarily just on their role. So those other ones on the first part of that membership category were serving based on their role, senior leadership role within an organization. So they're there based on their role, and then those additional members are serving 2-year terms, which can be consecutive. They can serve more than that. And the next slide is more about the organization and how the meetings will be facilitated. We have met 3 times already. We'll be bringing some recommendations to the group, to the State Board of Education, hopefully in the near future, maybe by May or June. And as part of that organization, we are in the process of defining or finalizing our bylaws, as well as we have identified our chairs, vice chairs, and have code of conduct within that as well. And there's some more in there. But hopefully that, we didn't want to bring the red line policy because it was pretty messy. And so hopefully this makes it a little bit clearer about what's outlined in those policy revisions. But happy to take any questions.
Questions, comments, anyone?
I'm sorry?
I was just talking to the floor. Any questions for anybody? If not, thank you very much. And Mr. Chair, that concludes our report.
All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keenan. That last item will be back before us next month for action. Returning to the previous item, in response to Ms. Camnett's question and Mr. Hall's answer, I'd offer this additional answer. A February 21st article in Ed NC of this year, meet a principal who offers love first in this come as you are school. It tells, I won't spoil it for you, but it tells the story of our principal at Southwest Edgecombe High School. That when she got there, students entered each day, and it was more about worry than welcome, worry about drugs and weapons and the dress code. Now students come as they are and greeted first with love. There's one great example of exactly what Ms. Camnitz was asking for, and I think there's opportunities all across our state to learn how to address these issues. So I'll offer that for your consideration. We're now going to take a short 10-minute break, and we'll reconvene at 2:20.
My granddad. Okay, let me Yes,
Get a couple big ones in there. And then Allison. So I thought that might be.
Yes, sir.
They'll eventually get there and they'll be online.
Ready?
Sir,
Well, then, I'll tell them that.
so he's,
I hope I'm like 5 minutes. Wendell, you ready?
We're back in session and we'll continue to our next agenda item, which is the Government and Community Affairs discussion led by Mr. Wendell Hall. Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this point in time, along with Ms. Jill Kentz, who serves as the vice chair of this committee, we will have Jamie, who's already at the mic, who will share with us a legislative update of the 2023 year and the proposed education bills that's in the pipeline. Anything else that you might want to add, Jamie? And any questions from or concerns from the group would be greatly appreciated. Thank you, Jamie. It's all yours.
Thank you, Committee Chair, and appreciate
Take a call.
I hope I do this in 5 minutes, so you guys get a lot of time back. No. I first want to thank Ann Murtha on our team, who has packaged all of this for us together and hyperlinked everything for you so you can look at it very easily and track the bills. Currently, there's, I believe, 90-ish, maybe 90 exactly, bills that have been filed, and they're being filed every minute. It seems like just on education, we have over 400 total bills, both in the Senate and the House, but only a few of them have actually moved even out of committee. So that's what I'm going to focus on today. I did want to give you a quick update that staff here at DPI has had to do several presentations over at the General Assembly, whether it's on computer science. Tomorrow, Dr. Marr is going to be talking about what the department and the state board and the state have been doing with the ESSER funding. So we're constantly over there, constantly communicating with our General Assembly members on issues that are coming up. So this slide right here this is for your own enjoyment if you want to put yourself through it. It's just a lot of reports that were done by staff over at the General Assembly, but if you do have time, maybe if you're in your car, click the links. Or sorry, you should read while you're driving. But sorry, I listened to them when they were live, so they were on YouTube, or I was able to do work at my desk. So, but if you do have time, look at the budget process, and it just kind of spells out everything about the process going on over at the General Assembly. If you want to go to the next slide. So I'm going to just focus on 1, 2, 4, and 5 today, because those are the only bills that have really moved and are probably have some movement on them. First, the computer science grad requirements. I know there's been a lot of articles written about this, and there's been multiple versions of this bill. And the reason why I'm hesitant to talk about the other bills that you see on there when they haven't even been discussed at committee is the bill that you usually see filed is not what is presented at committee. And what is presented at committee is usually a PCS, or it's called Public Committee Substitute, which is a big amendment. And so you see things get refreshed all the time. And specifically with computer science graduation requirement, this has gone through several iterations. Originally, it was computer science counting towards an elective. Then it was the state board gets to decide which science credits are kept, and computer science has to be one of them. And now I do think we feel very comfortable that the bill that as is, that should be heard in rules any day now and go to the House floor, will keep everything with the standard course of study as is. It will just have the state board eliminate one elective course, and then the new hour would be computer science. So computer science is a standalone thing, and this we feel very confident that this will not only be very benefit to our students, but also help with the business side of things in the state, and also what we're working on with career development plans, and really get students energized. We know that especially with females that take a computer science course in high school, they are 10 times more likely to either major in it or get a credential later on. African American and Hispanic students are 7 times more likely. So it's just getting those students introduced to these courses is what we want to do. And these are foundational level courses. And we can talk about this more in depth later on, or if today, if you'd like. The second bill, Schools for the Deaf and Blind, actually within the last 30 minutes just made it through the House with supermajority votes. It is now headed over to the Senate, and we will see what the Senate does. They also filed a companion bill over there, so I don't know if they're the exact same bill, so I don't know if they're going to move their bill over back to the House, but either way, it was just voted on. That bill is very similar to the one that passed both chambers last year and was unfortunately vetoed. The biggest change in this is that we have really worked with the disability rights activists that are out there that have some concerns about with the application process. And I think you're going to see other bills coming out of the General Assembly that will address the needs of the districts to ensure that the needs of the children are met rather than just being brought to these schools and having these schools figure it out. So I think you're going to see funding mechanisms and other things, and we've been working with staff over here with legislators on other bills. But also in this bill is the governor does not have an appointment anymore. The state board gets that appointment for each one of the 3 schools. On number 4, the Education Omnibus Bill. This was originally, I believe, the NCAP bill that was being run, and then there were some provisions that were out there, both from DPI and then concerns from the General Assembly, that this is sitting over in the Senate. We're waiting to see what they're going to do with it. When we have more knowledge on that, I'll keep you all posted. And then number House Bill 142, Protect Our Students Act. This is the bill that Superintendent Truitt has been championing that would strengthen the penalties on those that commit sexual acts against our students that are currently enrolled. Also requires the Center for Safer Schools to provide a video at the beginning of the school year to inform students and teachers what proper practices are, etiquette with relationships between teachers and students, specifically on the grooming side. And also this redefines what student is by definition, which would be any student that is enrolled in a public school K through 12 plus 6 months. So that would cover the grooming aspect of situations that we might see where students, when they immediately graduate, then the leader, their teacher, or somebody that they see as higher up, taking advantage of that grooming aspect. If you'd like to go down to the next slide. So Senate Bill 41 has made it through. This is allowing. I'm not going to talk about this one because the House has got major. They have some of their own ideas of what they're going to do. So I'll talk about this another day if it makes it to conference. But the Parents' Bill of Rights has made it through the Senate. This version will probably not, even if it gets to the governor's desk, will probably not be this version because the House has already said that they want to make some changes with it, which means it will go back to the Senate, then it will have to go to conference, and then they will hash out their differences. So I will tell you that the provisions in there, and I've been working with Allison and Dr. Petrie-Martin on this, are with the requirements for the state board to have like a review board for parental concerns. That would be very time consuming for the state board and the amount of appeals that would come here. And so we're working with the legislature to address that because it's not really, we don't think it's even necessary for the format that it's set up currently. And I don't think it would produce the desired results either of what they're trying to do. So I will tell you that is on our radar no matter what version of that bill comes through, as we're working with legislators on it. And then I did want to just say that if you go to the next two slides, they're also part of those 90 bills that I was talking about before and the ones that keep coming. There will be a lot of local bills that will be following, but if you go to the next slide, we're going to see a lot of calendar flexibility bills, especially on the House side. However, even if they make it through the House, considering that Senator Berger was quoted a week or two ago saying that he and his Senate colleagues feel that there are already enough wiggle room for calendar flexibility, and rather we should be looking to, I'm saying paraphrasing what he said, we should be looking at strengthening the penalties if you don't follow the law. I do not see the Senate taking up any of these calendar flexibility bills at this time. So I just want to put that on all of your radars. And I think that is it. I try to give you some time back. Is there any major questions?
Anyone?
I wanted to make a point of clarification for the board's benefit regarding the computer science bill. One of the things that I didn't understand initially but understand now is that we're not talking about adding a computer science class. We're talking about making computer science its own content area, and there would be about between 25 and 30 different classes that fall under the content area of computer science that students could take. Some schools, lots of schools, already offer at least one or more of these classes. Some don't offer any. And so this is an equity issue in terms of which districts are able to offer courses that lead to what could be a certification that could get you a job when you graduate from high school that pays good money. And so we want to make sure that we are asking for funding to go along with this. We've already gotten a significant amount of dollars from code.org, philanthropic dollars that have provided professional development for hundreds of teachers across the state, because we will have to provide that professional development for the teachers we have. It will be very difficult to hire away computer science teachers from the private sector. So we are asking for dollars to come with this computer science graduation requirement.
Can I
add to that matter, Superintendent? When I first saw it, I saw it as enhancement of your skills once you walk out the door. You just mentioned that. In order for you to be credentialed, that it goes along with the portrait of a graduate. And I just thought with this idea, no matter how it got in there, but computer skills, you can pay for it at this day and time. And these people that can walk out the door with credentials behind it, CTE, it's just absolutely the best thing for them. I'm all for it. I just believe it's time for something like that. Because that's why I see K-12 becoming K-13. I really do down the road. That's just me talking. I'm sorry, Jamie.
You said it perfectly. Great.
Oh, that's it, I'm perfect, I appreciate it. I'm gonna put that down.
You can quote me.
I'm gonna turn that home to my wife. Mr. Vice Chair, go.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. There is has been increasing conversation among parents and educators about this issue, and it's not necessarily questioning whether or not any of these new required courses are good, but or even necessary or very valuable. But there was first personal finance, and that we'll all recall we had to deal with how we were going to replace that in the rotation of social studies courses. And then there was arts, which I think we all saw a wonderful presentation on today, and certainly I know this board's very supportive of the arts. And then now we're looking at computer science, and we have a little bit of, there are only so many courses in high school that you can take, and there's a little bit of creep here in terms of courses that are being required on the legislative front, and there's some concerns about that in terms of how it implicates, for example, if the electives are CTE courses that help get you a job that you're not able to take all of them. I've heard some conversations may cause some districts to look more at a block schedule as opposed to a traditional schedule to fit in more classes, and there's block schedule versus traditional has its own set of controversies. If you've ever served on a local board, you're well aware of that and what the research is on all sides. But I do think we should be alert to this, because this is, in fact, I mean, I'd say it's officially out that there's commentary in broader circles about this. It's not focused on any one new requirement or any one new bill, but it is focused on the continuum of we can't continue to keep doing this legislatively without understanding that there's a potentially serious consequence that comes with that. So I raise that. And the second, if I could just, and I'll quit and be quiet. Second thing I wanted to ask about is you did not cover a bill that goes to the changing the Constitution as it relates to this board, and so it seems like it would be appropriate to report to the board about what the status of that bill is, just so we're aware of it.
Yeah, yes, sir. If you want to scroll up. The reason why I didn't is because it's kind of just been parked in rules for a while, and it has to actually get deferred. I referred, to another committee before that. If you look at House Bill 17, number 3, elect the state board. So what this will do is it's a constitutional amendment, which means it will need supermajorities to pass the House and then go over to the Senate, and it would say that the state superintendent would become the chair of the board, so it would strike out in the Constitution that the superintendent is the secretary and be chair, and then it would elect you all would now be elected positions by, I believe, congressional districts. But seeing that this has not shown up, or a version of this has not shown up on the Senate side, we're not sure what the Senate's viewpoint is on this. I think the House does have the votes to have a supermajority, because they do have a few Democrats who have already supported in committee. But we will continue to monitor this, and if we see anything that with the Senate and what their intentions are. But it would need to go to the Senate and be approved by supermajorities there too. As for computer science, I totally understand the sentiments that we're hearing, and that's why it's been a very delicate balance of working with staff here, with the legislature as well. I don't even know where he just went. So, Dr. Marr and his team have been really working on this one, and talking with those that deal with graduation requirements here at the department I guess there's been some conversation for a few months, a few years, on condensing the electives pathway. Right now, I think it's about 4 credits that you need to take. And there you go. Sorry.
Michelle Coltrane. Yeah. So we have had some conversations with the bill sponsor and others with regard to this particular bill. As you know, in current graduation requirements, there's a 4-course elective, and then there's another 2-course elective, and so those are separated. What the team here and from my division, the team includes standards, career tech ed, and advanced learning. All together, we're actually working on this, and we'll work on the implementation of this. But our conversation is really around taking that 2-block sequence and then converting it to a 1 5-block rather than a 4 and a 2. And then I think with regard to your earlier question about block schedule versus non-block schedule, personally, I taught on the block. I also taught on a traditional schedule. But I think ultimately, when you look at the number of credits we require, 22, and then the potential credits earned for students, so we have students who earn up to 32 credits before they graduate. So there is a lot of room inside of the 4 years that a student has to take all of the courses that they may choose to take. So I don't know if that was.
There's many traditional schedules that are 24, so when you have required to reach 22, there's not so much room. Block schedule does provide a greater
Sure,
room,
for sure.
which is why it's being brought up in some places where they have not traditionally favored it, or it's now getting back into a discussion.
Yeah.
So we just need to be alert to, again, perhaps the unintended consequences of these increase in scope of required classes.
Thank you. I think that I would be remiss if I didn't point out the fact that we have not added a content area to our standard course of study for 100 years. And I think the point that you're raising, Mr. Duncan, is a salient one, because it shows that we do have what could be characterized as creep. It could also be characterized as kind of modernizing our education system, but it has to be done with intentionality. And when a couple of weeks ago, when one iteration of this bill could have eliminated our science, I think there were some folks who pushed back against that, and the bill changed. But I do think that, when I think back to the team at Harvard who set forth what our standard course of study pretty much, the courses that kids take today hasn't changed in over 100 years. And I think that those, maybe perhaps like Mr. Hall's suggestion that we could end up at a K-13 someday, I think that we're likely going to be having conversations over the next decade about what kids should be learning in school. And we cannot continue to have the kind of creep that you've pointed out and not have those discussions.
Thank you, madam. Anyone else? Any, oh, I'm sorry.
Student.
Oh, okay, see you. As someone whose education is affected by all of these decisions, I actually took the personal finance class, and that was one of the best classes that I've ever taken on the high school side. It caused me to ask questions I didn't even think about before, some that I find that my parents probably didn't want to answer, but they did unwillingly. But as someone who's been thinking about, what the future holds and the expectations of career these days, computer science is like a given skill, but like we're not being taught it. So it's like, wait, you don't know how to do that? And you're like, no. So I think it's a really important thing to include in our curriculum that's going to be much more necessary with future career fields. Let's take credit to the child.
I was going to say it, and I'm not being funny. Now we've heard it from an expert.
Yes, sir.
Practitioner who is affecting, and we thank you for that. Thank you so much for your comment. Anyone else? Jamie, you hearing anything about the ask that the department and state board, anything, not getting specific, but where is that floating around?
Yes, sir, and I meant to mention that with all the hearings that we've been doing, but the superintendent and myself and Alexis Schaus actually went to speak to the joint budget committee with the House and the Senate there last week, and they only gave us 45 minutes. So the superintendent gave the priorities, and then because we only had 45 minutes, and you've all sat through my presentation before, it takes almost an hour to go through. We just went through the very big bucket items. And thankfully, Senator Hanig from the northeast part of the state said, K-12 budget is the majority of our budget. It's $10 billion. We need to give a little bit more time to this than just 45 minutes. And so the chair said, well, come back at 8 o'clock in the morning this week. And so we got there bright and early. And for basically an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes, we sat there and answered questions. And everybody's very engaging. I think because the budget was very focused, that they understood that the needs were there. And the superintendent even discussed, like, when we all bring the budget forward, we're not just throwing something and saying, I hope we get it. It's very strategic, the process that we all went through in the committee and then with the chairs, everybody else on the board. And so I'm very optimistic about it. We're going to have to see we have the budget projections of what are coming out, but with the final budget coming in tax day next month, we'll really know. I'm hearing numbers float around. They're all over the place, so I don't want to say that, but I do think that they were very receptive to almost all of our asks, and they were very engaging with the questions.
I do want to have some discussion, hopefully the committee, with you, board members and others, concerning teacher pay.
Yes, sir.
When it comes to retention, when it comes to recruiting issues. When we talk about teacher pay, that has to be a part of the discussion, if you ask me. And Vice Chair, you've had some conversation with some Northeast, because that's where you're from, yeah. And me. Yeah. But would you mind sharing some of that with us?
Yes, and actually, and I'm going to refer to something you've got up there in just a minute, but I actually met with the superintendents in the Northeast, as I often do, and they asked me to come and talk about the pathways work. And so we had a good discussion, and then it ended with all of them looking at me and saying, well, this is great, but this isn't going to be, this is a 5 or 6 year effort. We have an urgent problem right now, particularly in the Northeast, but I'm hearing it, we can't find teachers right now, and we need to be looking at teacher pay now. So I came home, did a little research, and if we could go back to the very first page here of this presentation and click on one of the links. Okay, the very last link, teacher compensation and beginning teacher pay. This is what I found out. And Catherine, you shared it. So I just want everybody to see those two charts. We can do that.
Yeah, and this was shared.
This is what I shared with you.
So this was shared by you, but I want the whole board to see where we are standing right now. And actually, it isn't right now because it's 2021.
We are using.
What's the year of these numbers?
We're using NEA's current
2021,
current
22.
numbers.
Okay,
That's the latest.
Okay, that's 2021. So this is cost of living adjusted, as you can see. And there's where we stand in our competitive states around us in the Southeast. And then the next one is even more disturbing. So, Wendell and I have been talking, some other board members have been talking, and we feel and would like to hear from our fellow board members that this is an urgent problem, and we need to address it now. And, our inclination, and Wendell, do you want me to just stop or keep on?
No, go right ahead.
Our inclination is to do some kind of request this year for an increase in teacher pay, and particularly to address beginning teacher pay. So.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey there. When you look at the average teacher pay being at 58, it's very frustrating because that average teacher pay is teacher pay across the whole state. And that is not a fair number because there are some districts, like Gina's district, who pay very well. And there's other districts.
But I'm still struggling.
Yes, she is. I'm sorry. I apologize.
I'm still put it on record. I still am struggling.
I apologize. Gina has been teaching fewer years than me, and she makes more money than me. Okay, and also there are teachers who there are teachers who get zero supplement at all. This is not the story of North Carolina's financial situation for teachers, and that average is infuriating to me. There are people who don't know that there are districts in North Carolina who have zero supplement, zero, and so it just makes me so mad. That's not the number. That's not the story. If you want to look at my pay stub, call me.
Thank you for that. Here again, the practitioner, the expert is talking, and we need to hear. We need to hear, and I'm sure it's the same all over. I don't think anyone would disagree with teacher pay, beginning teacher pay, average teacher pay need to be increased for the state of North Carolina. I stay next to Virginia, and I can tell you now, Virginia is drawing our teachers on that end. Franklin, Virginia, Suffolk, Virginia, Norfolk, and then of course they have an increase there. Georgia's getting you. See where Georgia is? South Carolina. But anyway, we know that, but whether or not we are ready to move on that as far as the General Assembly, as far as the state, because I keep hearing something like a surplus of $3 billion. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't write the checks down there, so I have no idea. But anyway, if there are any other comments or anybody wants to make a, yes, sir.
No question we should be paying teachers entry level enough to be able to recruit them. But we'll gain ground if we're leaving off the veteran teachers, because they'll be quitting as fast as we can gain on the other end. We need to, and also the veteran teachers are the ones that help the beginning teachers stay in the profession because they can support them. And if we're going to get them quickly and lose them, we're still not gaining ground. So it needs to be across the board, and the average needs to be what they're saying it is.
The minimum needs to be.
So you all know, thank you so much. You all know I approach everything with data. This is how sometimes we have to take the emotion out of our conversations and look at the data. So I do need to point out that there was $170 million given to our almost all of our districts to increase the supplement. So there are supplements in all districts now to help them compete with neighboring counties that pay more in supplements. I think one of the other thing that I would like to point out, especially since our treasurer is here, is that when we give a pay increase to teachers, we have to, 34% of that increase is cost of benefits. So we have a very well-funded teacher pay plan. It is about a $16,000 benefit that if a teacher were to leave teaching and go into the private sector, they would likely be having to come up. There wouldn't be an apples-to-apples comparison with their pay. Not all the states on this list have a state-funded teacher pay plan with retirement and health care benefits the way that North Carolina does. Now, Georgia does, as far as my research shows, and Alabama recently gave a 20% increase to veteran teachers. But the data also show that veteran teachers don't leave because they need to stay in the profession in order to realize the benefits of their retirement. So it's kind of this is why back when we were coming out of the recession, the General Assembly prioritized early to mid-career teachers getting the biggest pay raises over veteran teachers. Now, part of the problem with teacher pay is that we are paying teachers according to two metrics that don't correlate to student outcomes. One of those is years of experience, and the other one is degrees held. This is why we need to do two things. We do need to give across-the-board pay raises because our neighboring states invested heavily in teacher pay during the pandemic. Heavily. And we did not. The second thing that needs to happen is that we need to create a pathway to advancement that while we raise teacher pay overall, we also provide opportunities for teachers to be paid for those extra responsibilities that they already take on, where in some districts, in Wake County, teachers get paid for that. Okay? When I've gone and talked about pathways to Wake County teachers, they say, what are you talking, I already make that kind of money. Well, they might not in Edgecombe County, let's say. So, we need to, raise teacher pay overall, and we would need to raise it close to 10% if we want to be competitive with Georgia. But at the same time, we need to restructure the way that we compensate teachers so that it is attracting this generation of teachers to the profession. And that involves creating a pathway to advancement that comes with more responsibility and more pay for greater impact. And no, that impact doesn't need to be determined by test scores, but it could be determined by impact that teachers have in other ways, like mentoring beginning teachers who are leaving at twice the rate in their first 3 years of teaching as other teachers. So while teacher attrition has been steady in our state for the last decade, our beginning teachers are leaving at higher and higher percentages each year. And we cannot continue to, we cannot afford to lose beginning teachers. And we've already heard that we need to fill the pipeline with more teachers than we currently have. So I think this, again, this is a complicated problem. We will have 3 sets of asks, going back to your original point, Mr. Hall, when it comes to educator pay. We will have an ask for principal compensation, which is in badly need of fixing for multiple reasons. We will need to look at what those across-the-board pay raises are to lift up all teacher pay, to make us more competitive in our region. And we will need to ask for dollars for the Pathways pilot that will eventually lead to, in 5 or 6 years, as you said, Mrs. Kamnitz, to a new way, a new form of licensing and compensating teachers.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent Willstein. Thank you so much. Ms. Falwell.
Just briefly, none of us can be in a relationship with God, our spouses, or our friends if all we do is get blamed for what we don't do in the relationship, and we never get credit for what we do in a relationship. And we suck at communicating with our state employees about what the true value of these benefits are. And I would like to find a more elegant word for it, but that's the one that sums it up, I think. You can't be in a relationship where you're not getting credit for 16% of payrolls going in the pension plan, the health plan, always on top of it. So there's a lot of room for improvement to get credit for what we're already doing in this situation. It may not move the bar very much, but at least everybody's dealing with the same set of facts. Secondly, if my memory's correct, there's one state on that list that opted out of the Social Security system 62 years ago. Their teachers don't pay Social FICA. I mean, that's like 8% of payroll coming out of your paycheck. So my point is that when you compare these things, and you're comparing yourself to a state that opted out of the Social Security system 7 decades ago, that matters in terms of what they get to take home. What they make is important. What they get to take home is more important. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate those comments and those votes. Any other?
I have a quick question. Thank you very much. To Superintendent Truitt, to your point a few minutes ago about this districts receiving over $1 million something.
170 million.
Right, and that went to the LEAs, to the
Yes.
school districts?
Yes, ma'am.
And that was to increase?
The local supplement that districts use to increase pay, which varies, as Ms. Carper pointed out, varies from $0 to $5,600, or I'm sorry, $8,900.
And so do we track if that money has been expended, or how do we monitor?
I believe the Office of Learning Recovery is tracking that money.
So that, because counties also get monies to supplement teachers as well, right? So this is something different from the county supplement?
So that's what we're talking about, the county supplement. There are 3 or 4 counties whose county commissioners do not give supplements. And I think one changed its mind last year, so that left us with 3 that didn't give supplements. But the issue with those supplements is that they vary anywhere from literally $200 to upwards of $9,000. And so what this $170 million did was it gave the money to, I don't know if it gave it to the county commissioners or to the LEAs. I think it was to the LEAs. And the LEAs then could decide to use, they use that money to add on to whatever supplement they already offer.
So it was in addition to the county?
It was in addition to the county supplement, yes, ma'am.
Can we just footnote that there are 5 counties who did not receive any of that $170 million?
Yes.
We just keep saying all counties. And
No, well, initially I didn't say all counties, but the reason why those counties didn't get that money was because the point of that money was to allow smaller counties to compete with those counties.
And we won't get into debate on that.
Okay.
There are other things that could be said.
Mr. Chair, one of the other 20 hats I wear is on the community college board, and there's an event at 3 I have to be at, so I appreciate you letting me engage today.
You bet.
Anyone else? What I would like to, end this part of the committee's meeting, and hopefully, Mr. Chairman, you allow this statement, I have a statement out of
Sure.
for us to think about tomorrow, will be placed on the agenda. I think it probably need that. We are hoping to see a substantial investment, we being the board, committee, in teacher pay, upwards of 10% across the board, as well as investments in our beginning teacher pay to keep us competitive with the southeastern states. That is what I want to put before the board today, the committee. We're in agreement, and hopefully tomorrow, Mr. Chairman, it will be placed.
Any comments on Mr. Hall's suggestion?
Please think about it tonight, because tomorrow, we're gonna stand up with our chests.
I would,
Madam
thank you. My only comment is that, while in theory, I fully support that, I think that, I would feel more comfortable knowing what, not just budget projections are, but what the reality is after April 15th.
A fiscal note.
That's right, a fiscal note. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that is committee's report.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. We'll now move to our special committee on the North Carolina Pathways to Excellence for Teaching Professionals, and I'll turn to Ms. Jill Kamnitz to lead this discussion. Ms. Kamnitz.
Thank you, Chair Davis. This is a lovely next step to the discussion that we just had and some of the points that Superintendent Truitt made. So once again, we will welcome Dr. Dempsey, who is the chair of Pepsi, and also the Dean of the Watson College of Education at UNC Wilmington to bring us Pepsi's recommendations on the next step in the Pathways work.
Thank you, Ms. Kamnitz. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be with the board once again, Chair Davis. I bring greetings from the Professional Educator Preparation and Standards Commission and from the great city of Wilmington. So it is good to see everybody. At our February 16th Pepsi meeting, we considered a motion on the work that the board had charged us to do back in December. So we had begun the process of developing language to help frame the pilots that might come out of the Pepsi recommendations that were reviewed by the board. At the February 16th meeting, Pepsi unanimously forwarded to the board a motion, which you have on the screen there, so I won't read it, but there are basically 3 parts. One is to forward to the board the current report as of that date on the professional pathways and licensure framework framing, which were documents we call briefs and work groups of Pepsi. which included Pepsi members and educators and stakeholders from around the state in each one of the work groups, reviewed those briefs, edited those briefs, and added addendum language as was appropriate to each one of the work groups. So one, we have forwarded those briefs. The second is to recommend that the state board begin to use those briefs along with the Department of Public Instruction for the purpose of initiating the process of what the pilots might look like in the state of North Carolina and whatever appropriate interaction the board and DPI may need to have with the General Assembly. And then the third is to communicate back to Pepsi as we communicate, as we continue to do this work in terms of what the next steps would be from the board's point of view and for Pepsi's continuing work. So we have submitted that motion, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Dr. Hickey on these three recommendations? Any questions? Hearing none, then I'm going to assume that we are comfortable moving forward, particularly with number one, which involves the needs that we would have in terms of our own policy, but also from the General Assembly to move forward. And as you all will recall, Ms. Schaefer talked to us a little broadly about that in January, and I think she's got some more specific recommendations that she can bring forward. Do you have the ability to do that right now, Allison?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Dempsey. I know how much work went into that brief report.
Comment, great work.
Yes, such good work. We could, I mean, it's just amazing that you and Pepsi have gotten us to this point this quickly, so thank you for that.
We have a good team.
And he's going to stay up here for a minute in case you have any further questions of him that I can't answer because that would be a lot.
Well, unless I don't like the question.
I was asked to pull together some information for the board for this meeting that is based on Pepsi's work, which has been extensive. I've been participating in a lot of those meetings myself, and I can say they really put a lot of effort and work into this and very thoughtful. My review of the statutes as I presented in January of this year at the state board meeting in January. The board's work on developing the work the board has done on developing license reform, if you want to call it, or whatever you want to call it, and pull together some things that based on all that input need to be looked at in terms of making a request of the General Assembly. So I believe you all have a document that has been sent to you about that, but I will be glad to just go through that document and read what's there. And if you have any questions or concerns, I'm going to give Tim a copy so he can make red pen notes. How's that? Okay? Actually, I think I need that one back. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so this is basically a draft document that says request by the North Carolina State Board of Education to the North Carolina General Assembly authorizing the creation of a pilot program to study a new teacher licensure system. The teacher licensure program to be implemented, would ideally, as the state board might recommend, the state board should be directed to develop and implement a pilot program. I know that's been the general conversation among all the stakeholders at this point, to study a new professional pathways and licensure system to replace the current teacher licensure system. Such a pilot program would include local public school districts of varying size and geographic diversity, and designed to be implemented at the district level beginning in the 2024-25 academic year, following a year of preparation during the 23-24 fiscal year. The pilot shall be authorized for 6 years, or would be authorized for 6 years per this request, including the planning year. And I want to also, I've left out one important part of feedback on this. The superintendent was given information on it, and her staff has made comments, and that's been incorporated too. So I want to make sure it's clear that that has been an important source of feedback. Okay, so the statement of the need for the policy includes this. A pilot program is needed because the current licensure system is overly complicated and difficult for teachers to navigate. The current pathways into teaching profession do not have sufficient flexibility or professional support to meet the needs of teachers from various backgrounds who wish to enter the teaching profession. There are insufficient numbers of individuals entering the teaching profession, and it is critical for the state to remove unnecessary barriers to that entry into the teaching profession. Teachers in their first 3 years are leaving the profession at the rate of 12.7% per year, a number which has been increasing over the last 5 years, as the superintendent mentioned in her earlier comments. There are ways the states can reduce these higher attrition rates, and it is essential to the success of public education that the state have enough beginning teachers receive the professional preparation, professional development, and support they need in order to be successful. That's been a big theme throughout the Pepsi work, and feel supported so they will choose to remain in the teaching profession. The current licensure system does not allow the flexibility needed to meet incoming teachers where they are based on their unique and individual needs. And current teacher compensation is not commensurate with that of other professionals who have similar educational attainment. Further, teachers lack opportunities to advance their careers while staying in the profession, and these are some of the barriers to teachers entering and remaining in the profession. That's a statement of need. Again, that comes from the Pepsi work and the other groups that we talked about. The required elements of the proposed pilot are recommended to be the following: a series of entry points and transitions into the teaching profession with clear requirements for the different entry points and transitions that allow for advancement instead of the current system in which all teachers are treated the same based on longevity. Pathways for progressively advancing through the different levels of licensure to achieve continuing or permanent license and advanced licenses. Advanced teaching, mentor, and teacher leadership roles designed to support and improve classroom instruction. Learning tools and structures that are designed or selected to support teachers through the various levels of licensure and professional learning and advancement. Alternative methods to assess the competencies of beginning teachers, again, something Pepsi's been looking at. Methods to assess the effectiveness of the new licensure system on student learning, and reporting requirements, of course, to the General Assembly and the State Board on the impact of the pilot so that it can be determined or modified as needed as it would be implemented more statewide. Additional items that need to be in the pilot legislation, and I believe I covered most of these in January when I spoke to you. The pilot districts need to be exempt from being required to hire only licensed teachers under the old system, and they would need to be required to employ teachers under the pilot system for the pilot districts at the beginning of this. Again, this is to study. The State Board, informed by recommendations from Pepsi and DPI, would be authorized to create and implement a pilot program that will use different professional entry points, preparation and professional learning, and license categories than those that are currently in statute. The State Board needs to be exempt from rulemaking for the pilot districts because it takes such a long time to do that we could not implement that quickly if we had to make rules, and those would only be applicable to some of just the pilot districts. The pilot districts would be exempt from the State Board's current administrative rules, which govern the licensure of teachers, because we have the statutory structure already in place in our rules, so that would need to be an exception during the term of the pilot for these pilot districts. The State Board would need to be exempt from the current standard teacher pay scale, because part of the study is to put in different levels of pay, but the pilot districts would have to follow the pay scale that is outlined by the General Assembly for the pilot plan. So that would be something the General Assembly would need to fund and determine appropriate monies and an appropriate schedule. And then additional funds necessary to implement the pilot program, which would be determined following a fiscal analysis by the Department of Public Instruction. And then finally, the Department of Public Instruction that's implementing this plan, this pilot program, would report annually to the General Assembly and the State Board on the success of the pilots and impacting the attraction and retention of teachers and the impact on student performance. So those are just the bullet points that are before the board for consideration, and I let you discuss whether there's anything else you want to, feedback you want to give us. So.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Ms. Kamnitz. I do have a few questions. So we're using the term in the singular pilot, but the pilot would consist of multiple school districts.
Yes, I mean, from different sizes and geographic diversity. That's pretty common. You wouldn't just have one district being the pilot.
So, would this be on are you far enough along in the discussion? Maybe you aren't. Maybe this would need to be a board discussion at some point. Would this be voluntarily, or is that the way?
That's above my pay grade, so.
I mean, and I know it's not an answer, but I think these are the questions that are floating in my head.
And I think there has been some thought about this particular question, and that it would need to be
voluntary.
It would have to be voluntary.
Okay, very good.
And is it 4 units we're looking at? What did
I think, no, it would, so, we will need to decide as a committee and then bring to the board how, I think we're looking at between 5 and, I think your motion.
15.
5 and 15, thank you. Yeah, so I think it's gonna depend on how much funding we get, but yeah, between 5 and 15, and it would need to be a mix of different size school districts.
Absolutely. So during this, and I think I heard it's gonna be a 6-year pilot. Is that right? It's gonna run for 6 years of study?
That's what this particular recommendation.
Okay, good, okay, so we'll operate on the recommendation.
Just that hasn't been determined. This is what y'all are deciding now.
Okay.
So.
I'm just jotting notes. I'm speaking from my notes.
Our only decision is to ask for this.
I understand.
We cannot go any further.
I understand. So, and this is Olivia Oxendine's concern for a long time. And here it is. And I know that this can be discussed and resolved. I'm going to be very pleased when I hear the answer. See, I want to know in this model, at what point will the classroom teacher, at what stage, what level, will the classroom teacher be considered the instructor of record? In other words, I'm in charge of the students, I do the grading, I do report cards, I communicate with parents, on and on and on. I know I'm in the weeds, but I need to be in the weeds.
So let me just say, let's think about this in 3 stages. The first is authorization from the General Assembly for the general concept.
Got it.
The second is the development of the actual details of the plan. So that's where those decisions would be made, informed by Pepsi and the Department of Public Instruction and the state superintendent. Recommendations that might come before the board or however the plan would be developed. And the third stage is implementation. So this proposal builds in a year to settle some of those issues once the legislation has passed, presuming if it does pass.
That's why there's a planning year built in.
Yes, I'm just airing my concerns. That's what I'm doing.
You're not expecting an answer, you're just asking.
I would love one, but I will wait.
I think Dr. Oxendine is going to be actually 2 things that are connected. One is the term teacher of record, and then the second is the level of autonomy the teacher has given which pathway entry point they come in.
That's exactly right.
So those 2 dynamics will play out in the continued development of the pilot, but Pepsi's work groups have looked at those 2 things being connected. What is the appropriate level of autonomy, and when does that level of autonomy reach a level of being the teacher of record?
Got it. Thank you.
Other questions? Everyone's comfortable with this next step, I'm assuming? And that being the case and hearing no objections, Chair Davis, I'd like to suggest that we perhaps, is it possible to move this from a discussion item to an action item tomorrow because of the urgency with the General Assembly having the discussion it's having right now, the urgency of getting this?
Yes, Ms. Candace, that is a possibility. I would suggest to my colleagues to review closely the document that Ms. Schaefer just reviewed that's now, I think, or will soon be posted on eBoard. And so if we move it to action on first reading, it would consist of 2 parts. One is approving the request to the General Assembly seeking authority to conduct the pilots as contained in the document that Ms. Shaver reviewed for us. And then second is receiving the report and recommendations that Dean Dempsey just presented to us. So it consists of those two parts. So with that on the table, is there any question or discussions about what would be on our action agenda tomorrow from this issue? Okay, then I would ask you to study those documents carefully this evening, and if there are concerns before we get to this item tomorrow, please share them with us. But otherwise, we'll move this to action on first reading.
Thank you, Dr. Dempsey, thank you for being here, and thank you for the work, and thank you, Ms. Schaefer.
Yeah, Dean Dempsey, before you leave, I think we owe this gentleman and the entire Pepsi team a huge world of thanks. We laid on them a tremendous amount of work. They'd already been working on this, but from December to March was an incredible amount of progress and work led by Dean Dempsey. And we're grateful to you and your team for the progress, and we really appreciate the partnership. You give us great advice and recommendations, and we're glad to be on this journey with you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Yes, sir. Okay. We'll now move to the Educator Standards and Practice Committee led by Dr. Olivia Oxendine. Dr. Oxendine.
Thank you, Chair Davis, and I do chair this committee, and joining me in that responsibility is Ms. Amy White. We have two actions that will come before this board tomorrow for a vote. ES&P 1 is two reports, actually. First report is, we heard of this report last month. This is an annual report to the General Assembly, the report on the state of the teaching profession in North Carolina. There are a few, nothing major, but a couple slight changes that I'd like for the staff to come forward. And I actually, everybody's pointing to the sky, so that means Dr. Tomberlin is up there.
Oh, not all the way.
He hasn't left us yet, has he?
If he's made it up there, I want to know how he did it. Dr. Tomberlin, wherever you are, we're waiting on your commentary on the ES&P 1, the state of the teaching profession. Okay. Somebody's playing tricks. Do we have a backup?
He's been waiting, and so is it possible for us to move forward?
You better believe it.
Let's go on to number 2, and we'll come back.
Oh. Okay, let's move on to number 2, and we'll come back to number 1. ES&P 2 is a response to General Statute 115C269. This is the annual report from the IHG annual report. We have moved to a different set of alphabets. It's our EPP annual report. And we have Dr. Seibert standing alert and ready to go.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine. This item is about the annual reporting obligations.
I was hearing everything perfectly until...
Sorry.
Well, I'll let the two of you toss. I think Dr. Seibert, you're ahead.
Continue? Okay. Since February, when we brought this as a discussion item, we've made some substantial changes to the data we presented back on feedback from the field and some errors we discovered in the past couple of weeks as we've been working on this. So we want to make sure that we explain all those changes to you today. The reporting obligations, I'm just going to go through a couple of these slides fairly quickly because they're exactly the same as what we talked about in February. These are the references to law and the reporting requirements. The NCDPI website, the link on the next slide, our online website satisfies both the performance report and the report card obligations, and all the materials can be found at that link. On the next slide, which is titled NCEPP Dashboard, Dr. Petrie Martin. Sorry, I'm getting a little ahead of you. I know you're battling lots of things over there. Thank you. The EPP dashboard covers a wide variety of analytics, and so all of those are now and up and running on the dashboard for you to peruse. They're also telescopic in nature, so you can pull apart data in different ways that meet your specific needs. Regarding the new reporting features, in addition to the current reporting year's descriptive data, which we've added, there's also some data components in the law that require a narrative response. So questions like in the law, how are you preparing educators, how are you, the EPP, preparing educators to integrate technology into your instruction? That's a response that is not a reply with a number. It's more of a narrative response. So those narrative responses have now been added to the dashboard as well. And then lastly, we've included a user-driven ad hoc analysis capability, which allows the user to customize their program search to meet their individual needs. And our hope is that this feature will help the EPPs across the state better support their own program improvement processes and inform their work, as well as inform their national accreditation efforts as well. It's also going to improve our efficiency within the department as folks can better meet their own needs with the systems that we now have in place. So on the next slide, the overall state trends we shared last month are unaffected by our updates. We see that candidate satisfaction in the top left continues a slow decline since 2016. And the remaining metrics we're sharing there, employer satisfaction, teacher performance, and student growth, all remain relatively stable over the reported years. So I want to get into the data that we've found some errors and made some changes on. In revisiting the EPP enrollment data, we updated the enrollment analysis that we provided to you in February in two important ways. The first is that we corrected some errors we discovered in the underlying data. And then the second is we corrected how year-to-year differences in enrollment are calculated. And these are really important changes to bring to your attention, and we want to make sure that the data that we're providing you are really accurate and that they are well representing the hard work of the EPPs across the state. So our apologies for providing some erroneous data last month, but we're gonna correct that for you right now. So on the next slide here, you'll see under the corrected data, in the past month we addressed a few instances where data we collected from EPPs did not successfully import from the flat files. As we were collecting them from the EPPs, those flat files came in. There were a couple instances where we didn't make the connection into our own systems. We've identified those and we've added those folks into our systems now. One item of note here is with App State. When we spoke with App State, we discovered they had been coding some candidates incorrectly in their submissions. So their corrections impact not just 2022 data, but some prior years as well. On the next slide, you'll see in the data set that we used for calculating enrollment in February, we had intended to only look at candidates pursuing initial teaching licenses. One variable that we included at that time that should have been removed at that time were candidates who already had a license and were pursuing an additional teaching area. The field also knows that as a licensure add-on. So we've addressed that in the data as well. And then the last point that I want to bring up is around how we corrected the year-to-year differences in enrollment. And because we've changed the way that we calculate the year-to-year changes in enrollment, it's probably easiest to understand this by looking at this visual that we have on this slide, because it's really important to understand the annual data collection window. So in this slide, what we have illustrated is the annual EPP reporting year cycle. And the reporting cycle runs from August 1st through July 31st. And we begin the collection of a reporting year towards the end of May, actually before the reporting year ends. And this is because historically we've needed that time to produce the annual performance reports and report cards to meet the legislative deadline. But by collecting data at that time, though, as you can see on the graph, we're only capturing about 75% of the reporting year. So if an EPP enrolled a candidate after they submitted the data to the department, let's say they submitted a candidate in June, for example, it's not that that person would be lost so much as we wouldn't see them in our data until the following year when they reported the following year. So as long as we compare this reporting period of the 75% with a prior year's 75%, we're fine. And that's what we didn't do when we presented in February. So that was not a fair comparison, and I want to correct that for you all now. So on the next slide, you're going to see a little visual on the effect of these lagged admissions on yearly counts. So here we see the past few years of enrollment. Across the bottom, it's hard to see because my narrative language is being typed onto the bottom of the screen, but you'll see 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022 across the bottom there. So we're seeing the past few years of enrollment, and you're seeing in the darker shaded color, which is blue, you're seeing the candidates that enrolled during the reporting window. And then you are seeing in the lighter blue on top of those bars the remaining folks that we're capturing the next year and putting them back into so we have a complete data set for a reporting year. So as you can see, when we do this, about 24% of the new enrollees are reported after the reporting window closes. Then if you see in 2022, you don't see a gray bar there, and that's because we don't have that data, and we won't have that until the following year. Is it making sense? Okay. So what we shared then in February, this slide here is what we shared in February. What we presented then was a comparison of the entire enrollment data from 2021. So we took the 75% we collected in 2021, and we added the 25% of the folks that we missed in 2021, and we got the full data set there. And then we compared that complete data set with just what we collected in 2022, which is just the 75%. So we looked at a full year in 2021 and compared it to 9 months of 2022, and that's an unfair comparison, right? So, and we won't have the complete data set for that 22 until we get the next reporting cycle. So in essence, we presented all the enrollment data we have to date. And when we did that, we reported a decline of an in-enrollment of 42%. And I want to correct that now. So on the next slide, you'll see this provides the corrected data. The numbers here are adjusted, and I want to walk through this because there's folks in the field that actually, are calculating things, as I'm walking through there. So I just want to make sure everybody hears how this process is unrolling. So the numbers here are adjusted based on the inclusion of the omitted data that we referenced earlier, a couple slides ago. And we've also adjusted by removing the candidates that were pursuing that add-on degree. So we got those out. And when we make those adjustments to what we said in February, that 42% decline that we reported comes down to 39%. Again, that's an unfair comparison, but I want you to see how we've adjusted the numbers first, and then I want you to look at the two darker blue reporting periods for 2021 and 2022. That decline, the correct decline, is not the 39%, it's 24%. It's still a sizable decline, but it is not the 42 that we had originally presented in February. So certainly apologies across the board. We never like to bring data that are erroneous to you. And many thanks to all of our folks within the team to capture some of this, as well as our colleagues in the EPP community to help us get this all corrected. And then the remaining slides you'll see here are the slides, essentially new versions of the slides that we presented to you in February with the updated data. So the darker blue portion you're seeing here, we're looking at candidates, new enrollment candidates in the first year of the program, and we've corrected that. You'll see that decline of 24% from 21 to 22 on the far right. And you'll see the darker blue represents the apples to apples comparison, where we're looking at a reporting period to a reporting period. And the lighter blue is very hard to see on the visual that you have here, but there's a slightly lighter gray blue above that line, and that indicates the complete enrollment for each of those years. And you'll notice when we get to 2021, that's where that bar stops because we don't have data for 2022 yet. Okay? If you go to the next slide, we disaggregated the data and compared the alternative route to the traditional pathway And here, I think the big takeaway here is that there is a large decline still present in the traditional enrollment. That's along the right there, a decline of 44% from 2021 to 2022. And we're also seeing an increased presence in the alternative route in the preparation space. So the residency route system is increasing, while simultaneously the traditional route, it does not have as many enrollments as we've seen in the past. The next slide you'll see, we further disaggregated the data, this time by licensure area. And for abbreviation's sake, I'm going to walk you through what we're looking at here. From left to right, the first graph is elementary. The second is secondary. Then it's exceptional children. Special subjects. Then exceptional children, then middle grades, and then CTE. And when we look at the disaggregations there, all of those subgroups are in decline from 21 to 22 with the exception of CTE. And there are obviously, when we presented in February, we took the opportunity to think about this both from the EPP perspective, but also in terms of the broader pipeline perspective. So I'm hoping that we can hear from Tom Tomberlin to share some thoughts on the remaining couple of slides there. Dr. Tomberlin, are you available?
Can you hear me?
We can. Yes, sir.
Excellent. I'm happy to report that the reports of my recent demise have been greatly over-exaggerated. I am here, and I'm happy to report on this. I want to review the traditional pathway. I need to make it clear to everybody that when folks are admitted to a program, that's not the same as those folks showing up in public schools in North Carolina. And so we have this, for the traditional pathway, we have this chart that kind of shows us this admission cohort that we're looking at here for this year, this past reporting year. If we consider that to be the 100%, we know that of those, historically, only 86% of them will actually complete the program, and then a little over half of them will actually teach in North Carolina public schools within 1 year of completing their program. So this decline in enrollment, especially for our traditional pathway, is of concern, and it's concern for recruiting for our districts because we would anticipate that fewer than half of those will actually be available for employment in the 24-25 school year. Now, if we look at that same pathway for residency licensed teachers, we know, of course, 100% of them are simultaneously admitted and employed in North Carolina public schools. But we go on to look at how many of them will actually complete, and that's about 78% of them. And then how many will teach for one more year after completing their program, and that's around 59%. So there is good news that the residency license pathway is showing an increase, but I have to go back to conversations that the board was having earlier about beginning teachers and their high attrition rates. We know that the attrition rate among beginning teachers is even higher for what we call alternatively licensed teachers than it is for traditionally licensed teachers. So there is great concern about the attrition related to those folks who are going through the alternative path under current conditions, and the lack of persistence that we'll see with a much diminished traditional pathway of teachers coming in for the 24-25 school year.
And then lastly, really quickly, I just wanted to speak on what we're doing to mitigate any future errors in the future, as we move forward for the next reporting cycle. We're formally requesting through our official channels to move the reporting deadline in law out a couple of months. That will help us provide, give us a little bit more time to meet the obligations. Simultaneously, we've been in direct communication with the EPPs for some time now about considering moving the collection period from June over to August. And by doing that, we would better capture the complete cohort in 1 year as opposed to over multiple years. That was absolutely undoable 5 or 6 years ago because of the amount of touch points and lack of automation that we had in our systems. But we have two great colleagues now on staff, Dr. Baxter and Patrick Doherty, that are working to continue to pursue these automations that were started by Mike Cash prior to his retirement. That, I think, is going to help us make the case to see if we can actually collect it this year further out and not jeopardize our obligations. We're also working to provide better definitions of variables and components of reporting in the upcoming reportings. We give a guide out to the EPP so to give them more clarity in that process. And we're also going to share more clarity on the business rules associated with how we conduct the reporting calculations so that EPPs can work with their own data and come up with the same data that we're getting as sort of a check and balances. And lastly, we started providing back in December monthly EPP webinars to the field. This just follows right after the board meeting, we do a meeting for HR leads across the K-12 systems, and we then follow that up with an EPP monthly meeting. This provides us a regularly scheduled communication platform to support reporting collection and other EPP needs across the state in a regular, timely fashion. So.
All right, thank you very much. Well, the good news is that the corrections have been made, and you've been very gracious in your apologies, and I'm sure that EPPs are very grateful for the work that you've done to, and the other important piece of this is that we have a plan going forward to ensure that this doesn't happen again. So that's,
yes.
Lessons learned. It's a glass half full situation. So very appreciative for the hard work that you've done. That's the beauty of a 30-day and a discussion item, then a 30-day, so that the world can think about it and give some thought to it and express concerns and the need for correction. Any questions from my colleagues? If no questions, then we're going to go back to ESMP 1. Dr. Tomlin, you have it again.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine. So last month I brought you the State of the Teaching Profession report. This has largely remained unchanged, but I will point out a few little adjustments that we made. The first has to do with a chart on slide 7, I think, Dr. Peacher-Martin. Is this that indicates the attrition by years of experience by North Carolina teachers? We initially reported this as the raw number of teachers who left, and because we reported it that way, that removed the other side of the U, the right-hand side of the U. I had actually pointed out to you that was not existent, and when we express this as a percentage, we can see that there's still that very U-shaped curve related to teacher attrition, and that teachers do around year 27 or 28 start to show some very high attrition rates due to retirement. So we made this update in the current report. The other corrections that we need to make is a couple of the appendices were not completely correct. Appendix C and Appendix D were not, some of the columns had been switched in Appendix C. We've corrected that. And then Appendix D, we had failed to update it from last year's report, and but we got that done. And so this report should be ready to go to the General Assembly. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions from my colleagues? So we are going to, the request is that we approve this report tomorrow. I want to thank Dr. Derek Jordan for all the work that he is doing with his team, and licensure is a very tricky world.
Yes.
And all the policies that move about around licensure. So thank you. When I make a call to the agency superintendent, surely he's right there ready to go. So I do appreciate all of that. Okay, so we're ready to go to the last item. The last item is a discussion item, ES&P 3. This is that last June, we heard about a framework that was established by the Department of Community Colleges, such that an institution, an individual campus could request to the State Board of Education to operate as an EPP. So we have two coming forward, two community colleges, our first. So Dr. Seiberg, you're here, take it away.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Oxendine. If we can slide on, move to slide 2. As Dr. Oxendine mentioned, back in June of 2022, the State Board of Education approved the Community College Educator Preparation Program framework. And this is the outline by which any community college interested in offering an educator preparation program must adhere to. In that framework approval, future community colleges seeking authorization to become an EPP must implement standardized learning outcomes and assessments. They must submit the required annual reporting data. They're subject to the same accountability expectations of any other authorized EPP, and they need to provide coaching support throughout the duration of the candidate's program. So on the next slide, with that framework established back in June through State Board approval, any community college interested in seeking initial authorization must establish the staffing, resources, and supports to formally apply for EPP authorization in line with that approved framework. Now, the community college system itself set up the courses and standardized the courses and coursework, the curriculum, and the reporting infrastructure for the program. So because of the legislative rules that govern the community college system, it's somewhat complicated, formal application of a community college for EPP authorization must first be approved by the Community College System Board. So in that step, the college must provide evidence and attest that they meet the requirements outlined in the framework. Following the community college system approval, the request then comes to us at the department, and we bring it to the State Board of Education for final and formal approval. So it technically must require the State Board approval to actualize, but it's the community college system that does the first approval out of the gate. So with that, Blue Ridge Community College and Wayne Community College are the first two community colleges to be approved by the Community College System Board to have met the requirements outlined in the approved framework, and they're now ready for your board's consideration. If the State Board approves them, these two community colleges would then be authorized to offer a residency program that leads to elementary licensure for candidates. Applicants must already have an undergraduate degree for enrolling in this program, and the completion of this program leads only to licensure and not a degree from the community college. So I want to make sure that that's clear. And then on the last slide, in the supporting materials of this item on your agenda, we've also provided a copy of the program framework that was approved back in June, so you can see all the details about how they're intend to implement. The curriculum standard that the community college system has created. In line with that, the State Board of Community Colleges program approval summary and the institutional certification form, which attests to meeting the requirements outlined in that framework. And then while I'm providing these as the first two, my understanding from our friends in the community college system is that there are a couple more that are coming in the coming months. So you'll see more of these as we continue on into the spring.
Are there questions? I call this innovation.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely great news, good report. If there are no questions, any comments? I don't see any. We're all finished. ES&P.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine, and that item will be back before us next month. Very good. Next, we'll turn to our Strategic Planning Committee led by Dr. James Ford. Dr. Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I'm Dr. James Ford. I chair the Strategic Planning Committee alongside my colleague, Jill Kamnitz. This will be a very brief presentation in all likelihood because during our February meeting, we went through very extensively the recommendations and feedback from the working group on the recommended changes to the strategic plan. Since then, there have been absolutely no changes. However, this item is up for action this month, and so we have Dr. Petrie Martin to present or take any questions germane to that particular item. Since there appears to be none, I think that concludes my report. Thank you, Dr. Petrie.
Oh, well, thank you.
So not to let Dr. Ford off the hook that easy. So this will be back before us for action tomorrow.
Absolutely, I apologize.
Very good. Thank you for that smooth report. Finally, the highlight of every board meeting, the business operations team led by Vice Chair Duncan. Vice Chair Duncan. You're on.
Thank you very much, Chair. Along with Wendell Hall, we lead the BizOp Committee. We are extraordinarily pleased today to start at 3:48, which is 7 minutes before our program scheduling time. Maybe the first time that's ever happened, so we're very excited to proceed. We'll proceed to go as slowly as we can, given that. Our first item today is new business, and this is an important report, and we do have some important reports in here. Federal funding programs update for ESSER II funds. I believe Lynn Barber and Dr. Jenny Korn are here to report on status of the funding in those two. Very good. I see Dr. Korn here.
We've got one online, Mr.
Very good.
Duncan,
Lynn
and one
Barber's
in
online.
person, yes.
All right, we have another one of these Tom Tomberlin type combinations.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you. And I think Lynn is going to start us off.
Yes, thank you so much. Good afternoon, Chair Davis, Vice Chair Duncan, and Superintendent Truitt. My name is Lynn Barber, and I will say I'm excited to kick off this month's BizOp Committee with an exciting update on ESSER II expenditures. And I do appreciate, similar to Dr. Tomberlin, with the grace and permitting me to present virtually this month. Unlike other ESSER State Board updates, we will not be going slide by slide with business owners coming forward. Rather, I will be reviewing a few of the PRCs by the numbers, lifting up promising practices, and Dr. Jenny Korn will provide updates on ESSER II funded research being conducted. So as a reminder, ESSER II funds, or the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, are to be obligated by September 30th, 2023. So if we want to move just kind of slowly through slides 4 through 14, these is PSU state aid through the social emotional profiles. So through each one, I don't have an update per slide, but you will just see as we go through, there's a fiscal update of expenditures and comparatively unexpended funds, and there'll be a program update where relevant. So if we want to just kind of go through until we hit slide 15. And that's the one that states research study for $1 million. Perfect. So I will ask Dr. Jenny Korn to provide a couple updates on the next few slides on the important research that's being done that's funded specifically out of ESSER II.
Thank you, Lynn. So as you all will remember, we came before the board, I think last spring, and did a preliminary update using particularly these funds. We used these to partner with the EVOS team at SAS, and we conducted released the very first national kind of statewide study and analysis of the impact of the pandemic on the K-12 public school system. We spent a lot of time going out into the field and getting feedback from everybody when we released that first report, really helping people to understand and unpack what it was. It was a very complicated kind of, based on negative effect sizes. So we did all this work, and then we took that data to the field. We really wanted to ask some questions about whether it resonated with them, with what they were experiencing at the local level, why they thought perhaps some of those findings were happening. We had a lot of surprising findings, if you guys will remember. around AIG students, EC students, like things we weren't really expecting to see. But I think at the heart of this work is really about getting the data in the hands of the people that can make decisions about their ESSER dollars, how they respond to addressing the needs of the students that needed it most. And so once we went out, we did tons of regional discussions, took it to conferences, got some feedback, and then worked with our partners at SAS to do additional analysis. I have gotten everything out of this $1 million, y'all. We meet every week with the EVOS team at SAS, and we really are asking them, well, what the districts wanted to see was this. Can you guys add this data in? Can we recut the data? So we've done a lot of interactions, not just those main effects, and we submitted to Joint Ed Oversight a 500-page charts, graphs, like all these interactions that we had never been able to see before, so we could really dig all the way down to the local level. We're following this study up with funds from ESSER 3 that we're about to release. March 15th is our updated, middle of March, not sure the exact date. So it's really been, this is kind of the baseline, and it really is a first of its kind nationally. So I'm really proud of the work this agency has done in partnership with the EVOS team, and I really feel like the districts and the charter leaders have never been able to have some of this kind of data. I think it really speaks well to our strategic use of our federal funds. This is another example of how ESSER funds were used to support the teachers that needed it most during the pandemic. This is a very well-known, we have spent a lot of time as a state building out this model of the new teacher support program in partnership with the UNC Board of Governors. So this was funds that were directed and transferred over to the UNC system. And then as I've spoken with you all about this research partnership we have with the NC Collaboratory, and the new teacher support program is one of the projects that we're partnered on to do a pretty rigorous research and evaluation study again. So it's this idea of like braiding different federal recovery funds so we can both support implementation and evaluation, so that when that funding cliff comes, that we're making decisions about what to invest in going forward based on evidence and data. And then we've got one more slide, Maria. So if you all remember, we had committed all this time and energy and effort, $1 million, into a very rigorous quantitative study. But one of the things that all of us find frustrating with quantitative data is it tells us what is happening, but not why. And so in partnership with this board, we decided to take $500,000 that we had in ESSER 2 and commit it to qualitative study to elevate those voices of teachers and principals and district level leaders. And so we did this through a region-based approach with 4 of our in-state universities. We are going to be bringing that final report. The report from those qualitative studies will come to the board next month. Dr. Aaron Manuel will be giving that overview, and I think it'll provide some really rich sort of context and understanding to kind of unpacking what we saw in those quantitative numbers. And I think that's it for me, Lynn.
Thank you, Dr. Korn. So we're going to spend a few minutes on the next 2 slides. So this was PRC 176. This was an appropriation for summer programs. The specific parameters around this one were that it was a 50 hours in length, 25 of which were academically focused, specifically around acceleration, not remediation, and then 25 hours specifically on enrichment and SEL supports for students. Now, the PSUs could create a summer program for students in grades K-12. However, we specifically encouraged a focus on bridge years, so rising 3, 6, 9, or 12. 183 PSUs applied for and received the funding, and that's 115 of the LEAs and 68 charters. So a few points, as you can see, as of January 31st, 2023, 53% of funds unexpended, which is a total of a little over $21 million. So I want to touch on some barriers, and none of these are new. So there was a lack of interest in staffing or even competing for the same staff to run and work multiple programs. Transportation was an issue. There were conflicts with external programs as well as a couple districts brought to me that there was conflict with the dates for athletic tryouts. At least 10 LEAs intentionally delayed expenditure of these funds until summer 2023, given the barriers they saw in planning. And so I engaged with multiple conversations with the PSUs as well as the team of Office of Learning Recovery. And I know that they have been planning for months for summer 2023, and I do believe they are on track to expend these funds. And I do want to go to the next slide to kind of give an overview of both programs, then I'm going to bring up some promising practices from both. So this was 177. This was an appropriation intended also for summer programs, but it was a little bit different. This one was designed for students in grades 6-12. It's workforce aligned, and it had a requirement of 2 community partners. Community partner defined as a workforce board, a company, nonprofit, community college. And as you can see, 64% of funds were unexpended, which is about a little over $16.5 million remaining. And so there was only, I think, 2 LEAs that intentionally postponed the funding for summer 2023. But there's a few reasons for a higher, the low spend rate. One of which is kind of a highly risk-averse spending mindset. And by that, I mean, most of the LEAs turned this specific PRC over to the CTE directors. And while ESSER funding has very detailed spending guidelines, uniform guidance, it has more flexibility than Perkins. So there was a pretty decent learning curve or a flipping of the lens when it comes to allowable uses of this money for the program design of 177. So the programs that we saw and approved this past summer were, I would say, were more conservative. And I've spoken to many of the LEAs, the CTE directors, and I'm confident in saying that the theme for this summer is going to be leveling up in terms of program size, scope, and complexity. And so, and you can stay on this slide, but some data points, because I know we love some data, is over 8,000 students participated in one of these 2 programs this past summer, and there were over 1,000 certifications obtained. The CPR first aid was the top, the FCC certification, the workplace readiness, and a trust certificate for drones were some of the top. And I wanted to take just the last few minutes to really provide some feedback from the PSUs. We provided an end of program survey. And so these are our quotes from those surveys. The next summer, we will incorporate more project-based learning and enrichment activities for students in order to increase their engagement and love of learning. For 176, the quote, focusing on acceleration practices for middle schools was liberating for the teachers and the students. It felt less punitive than remediation. Another district hired 11th and 12th grade student interns to help plan and implement Summer Bridge for the rising 9th graders. This provided those students with great leadership opportunities, which required them to collaborate with peers and administrators at their schools. Once the program started, the students served as guides for rising 9th graders, providing tours and roundtable discussions. And so because PRC 177 was a targeted summer program different from a traditional academic summer program, the Office of Learning Recovery created and provided an optional end of program survey for students as a way to capture qualitative responses for students in grades 6-12. We created the link and it was deployed at the school level. There was over 3,800 responses from students in grades 6-12, which is a huge response rate. I'm only going to pull out, it was a 10-question survey, and I did want to pull out one data point. So the question or the statement was, as a result of this summer program, I learned new things about jobs and careers. 79% of respondents strongly or somewhat strongly agreed. And so I wanted to give just a few examples of how this was actually implemented. So job shadowing was huge, and there was one district that did a lot of job shadowing, and they stated that the counselor mediation on career choices was a plus. And they gave an example that a student who visited an electrical trades lab immediately said, this is what I want to do, and they ended up changing their pathway to electrical trades in the fall. Orange County did a fantastic Grow Your Own program. Not grow your own teachers, grow your own employees in a school district. And essentially they ran a 120-hour summer internship program at their school district and braided local funds with PRC 177 funds. Beaufort County said that PRC 177 students were exposed to all 3 academies and many businesses that offer careers that stem from academic participation. 2 participating students decided to pursue enrollment in the Automotive Academy as non-traditional students. And then the Morrisville Graded School District stated, for 177, we introduced 28 students to our CTE programs. We provided extensive hand-on experiences that replaced missed learning opportunities during virtual learning. Activities included building chicken coops, cooking, producing videos, marketing a new cereal, visiting a wastewater plant, and visiting a major NASCAR race car shop to learn about technology and careers in racing. And that's why we designed 177 the way we did, because all students deserve exposure to multiple post-secondary pathways. And I think it's important to point out here, just as Dr. Korn mentioned, there is some graded funding with ESSER 3 as well. So PRC 188 is the continuation of a summer career accelerator. So essentially the districts have the next 2 summers to braid the funds to launch a summer career program. So lastly, back to leveling up. The Office of Learning Recovery has partnered with the DPI CTE team, who are wonderful. Christy Van Auken, the special advisor to the superintendent on workforce, NCBCE, the North Carolina Business Committee for Education, as well as the Department of Transportation. And so we've identified some plug-and-play summer career sprints. So leveling it up in terms of more students participating, more credentials, certifications, more stipends, and community engagement. The topical areas that have drawn the most interest are early childhood education, clean energy, and then transportation. And so while there's a high percentage of unexpended funds, I can say confidently that the districts are strategically planning to utilize the data that is out there to pivot their plans, which can be modified. We're also sharing promising practices so that they can implement something that has worked in other areas of the state. And I know that I can speak for the Office of Learning Recovery that we really look forward to what our amazing educators and these PSUs will design for the students this summer. Thank you.
All right, are there questions or comments on this this report on new business and an update on the status of ESSER 2 funds? All right, not seeing any, let me say ESSER 2 funds, as has been pointed out by Dr. Korn, they end as of September of 2023. So and as you can see from the report, there are still significant amounts of funds still to be expended under ESSER 2. So we will have more frequent reports since there are only 6 months left. We will have more frequent reports, and obviously the staff will be very closely monitoring not just that the money is spent, but that it's wisely spent in the way we want it to be, because this is an opportunity to help our students. We'll not be ignoring ESSER 3 during that time period either, just to be clear, because it's, again,
Even more money.
It's an enormous amount of important sums of money that we can use to our children's advantage, and that's only got a year and a half left to go. So again, we'll be back frequently on these topics at this point. Thank you, Dr. Thorne. Thank you, Ms. Barber.
Thank you.
All right, we now go to Biz Op 1, approval of contracts, and if it's okay, I'm going to put everybody on the clock for a minute on these contracts, because I think we can do it relatively quickly. Board's familiar with many of these. Contract extension in e-dynamic learning, career and elective courses with Dr. Mia Murphy is first. She's the executive director for North Carolina Virtual Public School.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
I'm sorry. We're seeking the board's approval for a 2-year contract extension for e-dynamic learning, career and elective courses. We've been using e-dynamic in our catalog for about 3 years now, and we've used it to expand our curriculum offerings, increase completion rates, and really promote overall student success. We use the course content in about 10 to 12 courses. It allows us to offer courses such as American Sign Language 1 and 2, Microsoft Word and PowerPoint, Excel, and a few other electives. All the courses, of course, are taught by an NCVPS teacher. With the extension, the previous terms and costs will remain, and we're just asking for an additional 2 years to utilize the course content in our catalog. I gladly entertain any questions that you may have.
Thank you. And as you can see, these are very specialized courses. So, questions, comments? Dr. Murphy, thank you. Our next one is contract extension. This is with Sedgwick for workers' compensation benefits for North Carolina Public Schools. This is an annual exercise, and Dr. Townsend does excellent work for us on this, and she will report on a further extension as opposed to a bid, which will come later this year.
Hello, everyone. Nice to be here. Yes, I am here to talk about the workers' compensation DPI self-insured program, and I am here to request the State Board of Ed to allow another extension. This would be for third-party administrative services for workers' comp claims. These third-party administrative services are currently serviced by Sedgwick, and this extension is being requested from July 1 of this year, 2023, through next year, June 30th, 2024. The administration of services, to remind you, includes the payment of all workers' compensation benefits, which are both medical benefits and lost time or indemnity benefits. The contract with Sedgwick includes the staffing of now 30 individual employees. Those employees are all professional insurance people, and most of them are claims adjusters. They service, again, DPI and all of our injured workers. We have about 6,000 to 8,000 new claims a year in workers' comp and about 1,200 to 1,500 open claims at any one given time. This is Amendment 6, and we are going into our 9th year with our third-party administrator, Sedgwick. As many of you will recall, last year when I asked the board to make the extension for a year, I did say that the RFP would be going out last September, but due to staffing shortages, it was just not possible to get that out timely, nor to award it properly. But I am happy to say that as of right now, that RFP is in the hands of the DPI procurement folks, and I have made a request that it needs to be posted, the RFP needs to be posted by September 15th of this year. The expiring premium, or the expiring fees that we had with Sedgwick are currently $3,576,462. I did negotiate, I tried to get it flat, but they did come back with a $3.6 million expense fee, and that is a $23,500 increase. And I do want to point out here, because I think it's important, that Sedgwick really has been a great business partner for us. And if you look at the information that you have, they have really not increased their fees. Contractually, they could have increased their fees every year for the last 9 years, anywhere from 3 to 4%, because we're paying them based on the staffing that is now at 30 individuals. So they've been a great business partner. Of course, they certainly appreciate us as a business and the work that they do for us. I don't have anything else to add. If anyone has a question, I'm happy to answer it.
Thank you, Dr. Townsend. Any questions on this important contract, because it services people around the state and on a very important subject matter? All right, not seeing anything. Thank you very much for your work on this.
Thank you so much.
Our next item is contract with UNC Greensboro Serve on the homeless children and youth money from the American Rescue Plan. And Dr. will appreciate it. Well, I thought Dr. Townsend.
Hi, how are you? I'm Melissa Eddy. I'm the Section Chief for Consolidated East, and I'm here on behalf of Dr. Townsend. It's an honor to be here with you today. In regards to the contract, the program is ran through the Office of NC Homelessness, and the state coordinator is Lisa Phillips. She will be the lead. This line of work extends the work with McKinney-Vento, so there will be additional staffing and programming. The contract is with UNCG Serve Office, and we will continue to foster those relationships and continue those services across the state. So we're seeking approval of this contract. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Phillips has appeared before us before to report, and I'm sure she will again. And to be clear, this follows up on work with McKinney-Vento, but it's not McKinney-Vento funding.
No, it's through
separate
our American Rescue Plan.
Any questions or comments? All right, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
It's nice to see you. And then finally, our last contract is with Poe Center for Health Education, and Lillian Pinto, who's one of our health consultants, is get well again.
Taller than Lily. Lily's home with a sick child, so I'll take this one if that's okay.
That seems like a very good excuse.
Yeah, thank you.
Dr. Essick, well.
Thanks. We're requesting approval of a 3-year contract with the Poe Center for Health Education. The Poe Center has been working with children, families, communities since about 1991, providing health education services. Poe has been working with us with our sexual risk avoidance education since 2011. Since that time, we have provided, or they have provided, services to nearly 32,000 students and families. As part of our contract with Poe, and this extension will be expanding our reach to 10 LEAs, and in addition to some work, statewide work, and should be able to reach about 4,000 students a year with these funds. And that's in programs related to positive youth development, family relationships, family engagement, substance abuse, and bullying prevention.
All right, any questions or comments on this one? Yes.
I'm sorry, I do just have a quick question. You mentioned this is for SRAE?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Just a quick question. Every time I see you, I think about our days at UNCG working on our doctoral.
Yes.
It's good seeing you.
It's been a while.
In a different world.
Yes, very different world.
Tell me a little bit about this. I'm reading the item, and it looks like it's an example of some of the material that will be used in the program. Your Voice Matters.
It's a curriculum resource used by the Poe Center for Health Education, based on our standards, based on the health education standards.
Okay. So it's something that they have used before?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
And I think there will be some of this funding will go to shacks.
Yes, there will be a portion of the fund that helps support our School Health Advisory Council training that we do each year. We work with the Poe Center, and they are one of our partners for putting on that event.
And so will it be competitive in terms of LEAs apply for the portion of the money, or how will that?
No, those were already selected as part of our plan that we presented to the board a while back about the Sexual Risk Avoidance Education Grant. So those have already been chosen. We're just using the Poe Center to help deliver some of the services.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
So you'll be asked tomorrow to approve each of these 4 contracts. We now move on to Biz Item 2, and our presenter will be John Kiefer, who specializes in discussing the ununderstandable, which is our public schools allotment policy. This is a series of different allotments where there's some amendments, again, seeking to put together various modifications to different policies, and he is summarizing with his roughly 200-some pages of additional changes, but he will do it very efficiently. Welcome, John.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I'll do my best. Today we are bringing what we hope are the final allotment policy updates for this fiscal year, so hopefully you won't have to see me again until we have a new budget in place later on in the year. We do have...
we share in your hope.
Yeah. I'm sure on all fronts. So we do have 6 changes that we are bringing for approval. The first 3 are actually 3 new federal grants, so we're creating new allotment policies for 3 new programs. These are the first federal grant programs that we've received that do not relate to the COVID-19 pandemic in quite a long time, so that feels like a big milestone for the agency. The first 2 are for new grants from the U.S. Department of Education, multi-year grants related to school-based mental health services. The first is for professional development support for school-based mental health service providers. And the second one, which is closely related, is to support the placement of new school-based mental health service providers within specific districts. Both of these grants were competitive from the U.S. Department of Education. The Office of Academic Standards, I believe, presented on both of these grants after we received them back at the January State Board meeting. So you have been given information about both of these programs before. The funding for these will go to specific districts that were partners with DPI in our application to the Department of Ed. That was one of the requirements of the grant competition for the U.S. Department of Ed, was that you had at the application stage specific districts that were partners. And so the funding amounts are based on basically the approved applications from the U.S. Department of Ed. So there won't be any additional grant competitions or things like that to determine subaward funding for those two programs. The third new program is the Stronger Connections grant program. This is a new competitive grant for DPI to administer that originated from the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act that was passed back in the spring. This is a large grant program, $29 million, that was received by the department. The funding is to be used to support projects to create safe, inclusive, and supportive school environments. It's closely related to the existing Title IV Part A Student Support and Academic Achievement Formula Grant Program. The eligibility for these grants will be for public school units that meet the definition of high-need PSUs as approved by the U.S. Department of Education, which for North Carolina is public school units that are located in counties that are in the Tier 1 for the Department of Commerce's annual tier ranking of the state counties, as well as PSUs that have specific student to mental health professional ratios, and that the whole school, whole community, whole child assessment data would identify a need for additional resources and programming. And these will be grants that range between $400,000 and $750,000 per fiscal year for selected public school units. And I believe the Office of Federal Programs will be presenting on the RFP that they are developing for this program at the April State Board meeting. I believe that's the target. So you will be presented further information about this grant in next month's meeting. We did want to go ahead and bring the allotment policy, though, to try to streamline future agendas so that we didn't have to add an additional item later. The final three changes are modifications to existing allotment policies. The first is to update the SRAE program allotment policy. We have entered a new grant cycle for that program. It's a multi-year grant from federal DHHS. And the new grant has some new terms that we needed to incorporate in the allotment policy, including that the subawards are now available for 27 months as opposed to 15 months. So that should hopefully facilitate additional continuity of services within those programs at the district level. For the CTE program support funds, PRC 14, we are adding language to update the limitations on the ABC transfer rules for the PRC. They had, when they were originally put in, they were fiscal year specific and had become dated, so we wanted to update that. And then we wanted to clarify the allowable uses for the credentials portion of those funds, as the state contracts for the different credentialing tools have expanded since the last time the policy was updated. And then finally, and perhaps of most interest to the board, we are adding an amendment to the transportation of pupils allotment policy to clarify the distribution methodology for the fuel reserve that was included in this past summer's budget. We have worked with the transportation section to come up with a distribution approach for those funds. Basically, the budget required us to distribute the funds based on need, which we are going to be defining as fuel costs in excess of the price per gallon that is supported through the FY23 allotment, which I believe is $2.75 per gallon. So it will be for PSUs, including charter schools, that are able to substantiate that they had diesel fuel costs in excess of that level. There will be two distributions of funding. The first will cover the period July 1 through January 31st, and the second will cover February 1st through April 30th. And from what we understand from initial estimates, initial calculations, for the first disbursement of funding will cover between $1.5 and $1.7 million. So that'll be for the period July 1st through January 31st. But I think the transportation section is still working through those numbers.
All right, I talked briefly with Kevin Harrison this morning. I think the numbers may be higher than that as they continue to work through it. But still, for some reason, for optimism, we won't need the entirety of the reserve. And the other good piece of optimism is prices have become more favorable in recent times. So we can all continue to keep our fingers crossed and hope that between having this first allotment through January and then whatever the second allotment ends up being, that we will have that covered for our districts to the extent they're in an excess position. Any questions or comments on these? John, as usual, you've done a masterful job.
Thank you.
Appreciate that, and I know you're not going anywhere because
I am not.
Item is Biz Op 3, which is ESSER 2 and 3 budget update. I told you ESSER 2 and 3 would not be going away. And then an ESSER 3 funding request at the end of the update.
Yes, thank you. So in conjunction with Dr. Korn and Lynn Barber's presentation, and because we are approaching the 6-month timeline for ESSER 2 and the 18-month timeline for the ESSER 3 program, we wanted to provide the board with the most current data that we had on the current budget and expenditure status for the various items that are being funded from the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 grants. The reports that we provided show the change from the most recent approved budget to what we are currently projecting to be spent for each of the items, as well as the expenditures for the PSUs, for the allotments to the PSUs. The data provided is just the expenditures, but for DPI, we have included the encumbrance data. So that for the DPI items, it reflects what has been obligated at this point rather than the specific amount of dollars that have necessarily gone out the door for those particular items. Some of the things to highlight for ESSER 2, the spending does appear to be relatively on target for approaching the end of the grant period, particularly the large bucket with 6 months left. We have right at a quarter of the funding left. Which is a pretty positive outlook for our PSUs to be able to get through that very large as 1.4 billion that we ended up putting out through the PRC 171. So that is, they are working through that very efficiently, it appears. I know Dr. Barber talked about some of the items with the state reserve and where we are on that. But I'm happy to, also address any questions about the data on those items. There is some additional funding from ESSER 2 that was originally budgeted for other items that we are going to be able to repurpose for other uses. We did highlight that in the budget report. And I wanted to note that these funds were largely attributable to the closure of charter schools during the grant period. We've had several charters closed that had received funds. When a charter closes, those funds do revert back to the state that haven't been spent. So we did have a balance for some of the schools that closed during the previous school year. We also had some voluntary reversions from a couple of the programs where folks didn't feel that they were going to end up using the funding and wanted to return those to us for us to be able to put to a different use, which we do appreciate. We do have some admin funding that we do not project to use before September 30th. And then there were just a few other minor decreases that have resulted in around $3.8 million being available for repurposing. For ESSER 3, the data, obviously, we're a little further out, so spending progress is not quite as far. It's not quite as far along, and I did want to emphasize that for many of the grant programs that were authorized in the state budget last year from the ESSER 3 State Reserve, we did not get the funding didn't get out the door until late in the school year last year. So the spending does reflect just, predominantly just this school year for those items, if you're looking at where we are on those. And we do, as with ESSER 2, have additional funding from some of the ESSER 3 items, and these are largely attributable to lapsed salaries. The ESSER 3 budget included several items that required the agency to hire additional staff, and because of the nature of the hiring process and the job market, while we were working hard to get those positions filled and did get most of the positions filled to date at this point, we do have a portion of funding that won't be utilized for those items that are now available for other uses, which leads into the funding request. We are presenting 4 items for approval from the board in terms of the use of ESSER 3 funds. While we have both ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 funds that are available, we intend to shift expenditures from ESSER 3 onto ESSER 2 to move all of the available funding to ESSER 3 to maximize the amount of time that we have to spend any remaining funds. So these are all ESSER 3 funding requests. The first item is for $2.7 million for principal coaches. This will be to contract for the provision of 1 principal coach for every 3 low-performing schools identified in the state, as well as to purchase PD materials for them to use in providing support to those schools. And this will support the ongoing work of the Office of District and Regional Support. We have an item for $1,350,000 to help offset the cost of student participation in NCVPS so that we can lessen the burden on the districts who would otherwise be responsible for contributing towards those students' participation in those courses. We do have $212,000 for the purchase of a high-quality instructional materials platform that'll create an interactive NC Standards platform to digitize the NC Standards for easy use by educators, and this will tie into existing LEA platforms, including the LMS systems that have already been supported through other ESSER funding. We have invested significant ESSER funds in those platforms for our districts, and this will connect and tie in to getting additional value from that investment. And then finally, we have $1,580,000 for technology and teleworking support for hybrid work environments. As the agency faces a eventual reduction in our occupiable square footage, we've identified a need to continue to support remote work and to update our workspaces within that more condensed area to ensure that we're able to mitigate against virus transmission and to ensure that our operations are able to continue smoothly with an increased portion of our workforce working remotely during that transitional phase.
All right, so I'm going to be asked to vote on these items tomorrow, and so I'd ask you to get, it does not total, you will note the $7.377 million, it's less than that. But I'd recommend to you some careful review of these items that we're asked to vote on tomorrow. I also would highlight on the technology and teleworking support for hybrid work environments item that the proposed under the new building proposal is that the occupiable space for DPI would go from 256,000 occupiable square feet to 52,000 occupiable square foot, a 80% reduction. So that was honestly, this report was the first time I had realized that was the reduction that was contemplated, and obviously you can't do that without contemplating a whole lot more remote work than presently occurs. And so I think that's something we need to highlight for the board for your consideration and your thoughts. I personally am very concerned about that, but others may not be, but maybe I'm just too much of a dinosaur to think that much remote work that fast can be easy for our staff. I think it'll be a challenge for our staff at best, and so I'm very concerned about that. So I do recommend carefully looking at these items. Superintendent Truitt.
As someone who cannot work from home very effectively or efficiently, I was shocked at the number of folks in the agency who said that they did work better from home. And in order to compete with talent at other agencies in areas like HR, IT, and finance, we have had to make significant allowances for people to work from home, to continue to work from home coming out of the pandemic. Each division or office within the agency has been permitted to set the parameters of the amount of time that folks can work from home and the amount of times that folks need to be in the building for meetings. I will tell you that we have started requiring at our monthly directors meetings folks to be in person. We do not have a virtual option anymore for those monthly meetings, to your point, Mr. Duncan, because there are times when we must be together. So we've sort of let the culture dictate who is in the building and when. And then, of course, you know, half of our employees approximately are in the field as it is and live in the districts that they serve. But yes, the square footage that you mentioned changed. The plan changed right around the time the committee met last. And any specific questions or concerns can be directed towards Shelby Armentrout, Chief of Staff, who has just been absolutely a superstar working with those appointed by the legislature to help with this process, as well as those other agencies that are impacted by this as well.
Any questions or comments on these items? While John is here, and Superintendent can also answer them. All right, I'm not hearing any, so let's go on into the next item. Thank you very much, John. That is the end of our action on first reading items. We're now going to go to a discussion on a very important topic we spent a lot of time, frankly, worrying about over the course of the last couple of years, which is our chief financial officers and identification of our chief financial officers around the state. So this is a discussion item. Jennifer Bennett, who's our Senior Director of the Office of Financial and Business Services, to talk about a policy amendment to our professional certification of North Carolina finance officers.
Afternoon, everybody. Yes, we've been working on this policy for a while. Our last amendment came to you a few months ago where we updated the interim finance officer section of that. But this is the policy that we've been working to update. It basically, just as a reminder, 115.435 establishes the position of the school finance officer in general statute. So in the LEAs, you have a statutory required position of the superintendent and the finance officer. 1985 is when the session required the SBE to develop the standards for this position, and this policy, FINO 000, is the policy that relates to those standards. It was last materially revised in May of 2005. So the key elements in our revision is that, one, we're required to provide this policy. We did meet with a focus group of finance officers, both sitting and retired, through our NCASBO network to work through various suggestions, revisions, requirements, what we saw as success, what we saw as failure in certain positions over the past, I would say, 6 to 8 months on that. The standards were revised to remove task-related items that did not seem applicable in a policy. The policy was also expanded with a new section to add the expected pay grade range for the finance officer within this policy, as is under the SB's responsibility to establish those classified ranges and by general statute for this specific position. And we do feel the policy strengthens the base requirements for this position to ensure our school districts have personnel to meet those complex work required for this. Again, it was very important in our focus group, and as we've been observing the various vacancy rates, the people being successful in these positions, to ensure that we had a policy that would help solidify what could be successful or had the greater odds of making somebody successful should they meet these requirements. Our main revision is in the duties and responsibilities section at the top. We revised that general description to read, as you see, italicized. I'll read that very quickly for everybody since it talks to the essence of the position. The LEA finance officer is responsible for all fiscal affairs of the school system, including the state, federal, and local funds, the enterprise funds, and capital operations. The finance officer shall install and maintain an integrated system to plan fiscal operations to ensure sound decisions, accountability, and transparency. This is legislatively required position per General Statute 115C-435 and must be able to interpret and follow fiscal regulations prescribed by the North Carolina General Statutes, State Board of Education, federal agencies, the Local Government Commission, and other funding entities. This position is the financial leader of the school district and is required to have a comprehensive accounting knowledge, including the ability to interpret and implement new accounting standards per GASB. This position is a critical component of the leadership of a school district. We also, as I reminded, we did remove a lot of the task-related items in that and crafted that general section to be more of a job description and cover the global nature of the position. We also felt that by doing that, that will help us work with LEAs to post a more aggressively and standardized job description when they're posting for these vacancies. The new section is the 1.3 for the state salary. Again, we're required to provide that. We did align this position with that of the Office of State Human Resource Accounting Director 1 and 2 positions seem to be most adequate for that. That has a minimum pay grade of NC 24, which is $80,011, a maximum pay grade of NC 25. We are stipulating that it is capped that the maximum salary paid from state funds cannot exceed the maximum allowable to be paid for the superintendent of the LEA in which this position is located. What this will do is allow each district to create a salary schedule that aligns with the size and scope of that LEA, as well as ensure they're able to pay a competitive salary for the critical position. They can always go over the state funds with local as they can with any position in their district. The other main section changes were in section 2 for the qualifications. We're recommending that these qualifications go into effect July 1st of this year. We have increased the experience range from 3 to 5 years of experience. We're requiring that experience to be in financial operations, not just a business-related field. We have found in our observations and in the feedback that having financial operations experience and knowing what that means as far as purchasing, accounts payable, payroll, accounting, and all of that is much more important to the success of this position than others coming from just a different type of business field. It was deemed very strongly that the accounting knowledge is paramount to the success of this position, so we are recommending a minimum of 15 hours of accounting coursework. That's an increase from the current 9 hours. We also are not allowing just an MBA to qualify unless it contains the accounting coursework that supports those requirements. We are allowing a licensed CPA, not just specific to North Carolina, so a licensed CPA in any other state. And we are allowing anyone certified prior, or recommending that anybody certified prior to July 23 maintain that approval. In other words, grandfathered in. In summary, we feel the recommendations strengthen the requirements to reflect what has been proven to allow employees to be successful in the critical position. We have strengthened the pay grade to allow the position to allow a competitive scale that does match the district size and scope. We do think it provides a stronger set of essential job standards and expectations that more align with the work required to be performed by the school finance officer. And we do eliminate much of the process-related items that really should be done as a supplemental process document to support the policy rather than written specifically in policy. And I'll take any questions.
So the board has rightfully commented over the course of the last 2 or 3 years about concerns in this position and availability of the high-quality people. This is such a critical position to the success of any local school district. And so the committee has certainly heard that, and the staff has certainly heard that, and worked hard to put together a proposal to make this a position that has greater salary flexibility from the state dollars. Obviously, it has local dollar flexibility as well. That has a greater emphasis on maintaining well-defined qualifications as well as the actual work that has to be done within those confines. And so this is a discussion item, so we open the floor for any comments, and I know Jennifer will be happy to answer any questions, but we think this is a way to get to a better place. Ms. Campbell.
Yeah, I appreciate that the pay grade adjustment, you're expecting that to make a difference, but there still are some districts where there's just not qualified people, even the current requirements, and this certainly raises the bar, as it should. Are we expecting to have this contribute to the shortage, or do you really think it's going to, particularly the Northeast and some parts of the
Yes, we're working very closely with NCASBO. We've actually talked about what our marketing campaign needs to be as soon as we pass the new policy. This is it's a very niche role. However, you have a lot of young CPAs, you have a lot of younger people entering the accounting field that may not be aware of the diversity that's in this position, right? It's a dynamic position. It's actually one I'm very passionate about. I never would have thought I would have been a school finance professional from where I started and now. So we have been talking about an aggressive kind of marketing campaign on how to attract this to those young CPAs that have been doing their 2 years of audit that's required, but then they're like, I don't think I want to do this forever. I need to get into business. And we want to market this as this is a dynamic area you can go into. It's a national position. You can move anywhere in the United States or overseas, and they're going to require a school district finance professional in those settings. And so we want to try to help with that. We also feel that the job description, the way we've presented it, will help LEAs in those districts especially that don't really have an idea how to post that, and help aggressively help them post. We are working, in fact, right now, one of our vacant positions that's actually not going to be vacant until July, but NCASBO is already working with that LEA on interviewing for that new applicant. And so we are trying to be very aggressive in that, because we do know that there's some concerns. However, it is also a you get what you pay for situation as well. So it is a catch-22 on some level, but we do feel very strongly by strengthening the position that we will be able to attract those candidates that see it in that different, stronger light as a financial leader of a school district.
As an add-on to that, we might want to make sure the state treasurer's not here to speak, so but I'm going to add on all the state benefits that you get with this job.
Yes.
Which considerably, that has to be really enticing to some young folks that are graduating with accounting degrees. So I think it really, what y'all have done is amazing. So thank you.
Dr. Iverson?
Yes, thank you so much, Vice Chair Duncan, and for your report or presentation. I'm wondering if this would have any legs to it, maybe in our schools of business, on our university campuses, to offer something like a certificate in that field to attach to an accounting degree, let's say.
Well, we have been discussing offline just different internship opportunities also. So we'll definitely explore those options and start to aggressively actually discuss some of this with the School Boards Association as well, to provide some more education to the school boards themselves as to what's required for this position, so we can help strengthen how that's viewed.
I think that schools of business, especially like in the rural areas, I'm thinking, for instance, UNC Kellogg or Fayetteville State or
Correct.
medium-sized schools where there is a dire need of these positions in the Sand Hills.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments? All right, we'll have time to think through till next month. If you have anything come up, let's talk about it. Thank you very much to our staff for the work that's gone into this and bringing this to us. We're going to come to a close here pretty quickly. Biz Op 5 is a consent item. It's a report to the North Carolina General Assembly on advanced courses, AP, baccalaureate, and Cambridge, AICE, and it also has reports on the teacher bonus program and sets out, you will see, the amounts of bonuses that are made available. Sneha Shah Coltrane is here on this, but I wanted to point out one thing. This is where BizOp committee occasionally gets to talk about an interesting issue that we should make note of. Of our 115 LEAs, 12 have no AP IB graduates or Cambridge Institute graduates, and 12 more have less than 10. So that's 24 out of 115. So as we think about all the great work that's going on there and all the great results, both here from the department and certainly statewide, which we celebrated last month, and rightfully so, we need to probably take a deep look at those areas where they're not getting the same kind of traction as they are in other areas. This report will identify that for you. It's very helpful in that regard. Any other questions for Sneha on this? We'll be asked to approve the report tomorrow by vote.
I did pull some data if you wanted me to share it, Mr. Duncan.
I got a lot of heat on me from Chair Davis, so if you can do it.
So no, I'm fine not to, but you had asked, so I
No, I did. If you can do the 1 minute rule.
1 minute rule. So I did look, a lot of these districts do offer CCP, but just so you know, CCP courses. I will say the North Carolina AP Partnership is making a very focused effort to expand in these areas. For example, Bertie and Anson, for example, this year actually has 2 courses, which they've had none, and Edgecombe has grown, which we're so excited about. Edgecombe had 6. We are offering 9 with 175 students. So as we continue to break some boundaries with access, of course, then will come success, but still a long way to go at some of our districts.
Thank you, because as we look at equity as a hallmark of what we want for our students, access is an important part to equity, so thank you. Our final is a report that's required annually to the North Carolina General Assembly, which is School Business Systems Modernization. We have prepared that report. It reports on the developments of the past year. I see Dr. Wren there. A lot of work has been done in the past year to be able to report on. We continue to move forward, and we would all acknowledge we still have a lot more work to do, but this report familiarizes the General Assembly with the very good work that's been done by our staff in the past year. Haven't heard any questions or comments about executed contract report or the claim contracts report. Are there any? I will pause. All right, not hearing any, and I have not heard anything on our monthly budget report, so again, we'll pause very momentarily. All right, not hearing any. Thank you very much to the staff who've worked on all these items, and there's been a lot happening and a lot of good work done. Oh, we do have something. I'm sorry. Ms. Schaus.
Yes, it's the Bizarre Party Favor of the highlights of the North Carolina public school budget. We bring to you today, it is a highly anticipated publication that you have for your personal, you can take it away with you and keep as your companion. It is a publication we bring out to the board and actually to the public, the General Assembly, the State Budget Office. We all use these same numbers. It is a consistent publication, meaning that from year to year you can see the comparison from year to year, so following the appropriations, the number of students, the number of personnel, etc. It is for you to keep and treasure. So I just wanted to bring that to you. Don't think that BizOp doesn't bring you great things. So that's all I had to say. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. And our refreshments that go with this party favor are whatever's back in the kitchen that's left over from lunch. That completes our report.
Thank you, Vice Chair Duncan. This concludes our open session items for the day. I request a motion to go into closed session. Vice Chair Duncan.
I move that we go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute, Section 143-318.11, A, 1, 3, and 6. To prevent the disclosure of information that is privileged or confidential pursuant to North Carolina General Statute, Sections 115C-319 and -321, and 120-129 et sec. To consider the qualifications, competence, performance, or condition of appointment of public officers or employees or prospective public officers or employees. And to consult with our attorneys in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorneys and the public body, including a discussion of the following pending cases. OM by CF versus North Carolina Independent School District. Cooper versus DPI et al. Phillips versus DPI et al. And Northeast Raleigh Charter Academy doing business as Torchlight Academy versus Torchlight Academy Schools LLC et al. Versus North Carolina State Board of Education and Stefan Bowens.
Motion by Vice Chair Duncan. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Hall. Any discussion? Dr. Petrie Martin.
Dr. Oxenine.
Yes.
Mrs. Kamnitz.
Yes.
Mr. Keenan.
Yes.
Mr. Hull.
Yes.
Dr. Tipton Rogers.
Yes.
Mrs. White. Mr.
Yes.
Mr. Blackburn.
Yes.
Mr. Blackburn.
Yes.
Dr. Ford.
Yes.
Treasurer Falwell. Lieutenant Governor Robinson. Vice Chair Duncan.
Yes.
Chair Davis.
Yes. Motion carries. Let's be in closed session at 5 p.m. We will not be returning to open session today, but after close, we'll adjourn immediately. But we will reconvene tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. See you then.